basically what it comes down to is that oftentimes our enemies' heroes are actually our enemies, whereas they consider our heroes to be their enemies. So the ones who are fighting for freedom, whether it's agite, they're at the crossroads, whatever it is, they are like, these are enemies, they're shooting them down. But to us, they're heroes. You look at the same thing just in terms of Gandhi. Anytime your enemy puts someone in front of you and says, look, this is a great person, you have to look at it from your own perspective. As an African, what did this person think about me? What did this person do to me? You understand? So the other young man, he's my graduate assistant. We're working on an article, a tricontinental analysis of South Africa, India, and America, US. And basically looking at, in all three instances, you have black people suffering at the hands of white people. So in the US, there were all these lynchings, and still are. They just use police badges now when they're doing it. But we were suffering from all types of things. After enslavement formally, then they had the 13th Amendment that said that slavery can exist after you are convicted of a crime. So then after that, all those same people who were just enslaved, they arrested all of them and said, look, you're all criminals, you still have to work for free. I actually wrote an article on that online, so I can give you the reference. And, so continued enslavement, nowadays they call it the prison industrial complex. At that point in time, they called it convict leasing, where they would, take you, arrest you for nothing. You're sitting there and say, oh, you're loitering. Now you have to go do hard labor. 3 tons of coal you have to dig every single day. Meanwhile, you are waist deep in water, and you're not allowed to get out to defecate. You're not allowed to get out to urinate, so you have to do everything in there. Then they also don't provide water, so you have to drink from that same water. So this is all very well documented. There are some books and documentaries out there, worse than slavery, slavery by another name, so all of that. But nowadays they have the same thing where they just arrest you. They'll say, all of you people are criminals. Guess what? You still have to work for free, right? So that's the US. We have all these different problems, especially being killed, murdered, and things of that nature. But when it comes down to something like the civil rights movement, they say, you know what? Your problem is just that you're segregated. You're not close enough to white people. So once we resolve that, just sit down. You don't have anything to worry about again. You understand? So when your enemies are telling you how to resolve your issues, you have a good idea that most likely what they're doing is misdirection. So they haven't done anything about our continued enslavement in prisons. They haven't done anything about us being killed. They haven't done anything about us being, they call it the school to prison pipeline, where all black children are basically just put into special education. They pump them full of Ritalin and get them straight ready for the prison system. Those who are smart enough to say, this is stupid, I'm going to drop out, well, then they have other avenues and say, here are guns, here are drugs, here are other things. So it's like no matter which way you go, as long as you're following the path that they lay out, it's not working out for you. But the similarity with South Africa is the same thing. There they call it segregation. So we'll resolve all your problems by just allowing you to sit down next to us on the toilet, basically, which doesn't resolve any of our problems. Yeah. But then the same thing in South Africa. You have these whites who came and stole our platinum mines, who stole all of the land, the most fertile land, and they're still on that fertile land. When you see these apples that are coming, they're coming from stolen land that these whites have down in South Africa. So all of these things, the killings, the murders, the rebellions. When we tried to rebel, Gandhi fought against the Zulus in South Africa. So all of these things are going on. But now when it comes down to resolving our issues, they say, you know what? Your issue is just apartheid. You are too far away from us. We'll let you be close to us, but we won't redistribute any of the wealth. You won't get your land back. You won't get your gold mines, or your diamond mines, or your platinum mines, copper, anything else. We'll just allow you to sit down next to us on the toilet. and I'm actually paraphrasing Malcolm X. That's who's on the door here in the bottom right, where he says, he critiques the so-called Negro Revolution in America, where he say, this type of revolution where all you're fighting for is to sit down on the toilet next to white folks. So when I'm saying that, I'm actually paraphrasing his critique at that time of what they were doing. But so again, we see the exact same thing in South Africa, where they say, that's your only issue. Just come next to us and now shut up about your lands, shut up about your platinum, your diamonds, your gold, your people, all these types of things. And then we're going to look at India as well. We have the same thing. Now, Ranoko Rashidi, he says that if we actually are counting black people, then the largest population of black people outside of Nigeria is in Brazil, is in India. So if you look at southern India, if you look at the Sidi people, they are blacker than any Ghanaian you've ever seen, right? And they're still there to this day. These are the original founders of that civilization before these Indo-Aryans came in. And Gandhi was very interesting. He said, yes, we are the Indo-Aryans. So when he was talking to the British in South Africa, he says we're co-colonists, right? And, we have this Indo-Aryan brotherhood. So you need to help, be with us as we're helping to colonize these savage blacks. You understand? Because he was appealing to this idea of Indo-European. So when they look at Sanskrit, when they look at Latin, Proto-Germanic, all these languages, they have similar roots. So he was saying, look, we're all related. And these are the people who oppress the indigenous black people, who go under different names, Dravidians, Dalits, Sidis, so forth and so on. But those black people are still there to this day. Now they have all types of problems for the past few thousand years since these Indo-Aryans have been there, including if your shadow touches their shadow, they will burn you alive. If they have it so you have to wear a pot around your neck so that if you spit, it doesn't pollute the soil. They're called untouchables. They're unseeables. So all of these, they have somewhere you have to wear a broom on your waist behind you so that your tracks won't pollute the earth and you sweep up as you walk past. So these are the Dalits. There's a book by V.T. Rajshekar called Dalits, the Black Untouchables of India. Today. And this will help you understand why they are beating and killing Africans who are going there now. So just last year, a guy out of Congo killed in broad daylight. Now you won't understand that unless you know how they are already treating the black people who are there, who founded the civilization originally. And now they see more black people, say, oh, we'll just give you the same treatment we've been giving our own black people. So all of those are issues that have gone on. They have what are called pogroms, which is where these caste Hindus go and just murder and rape, this entire thing. There was actually a movie, what was that called? Slumdog Millionaire. And in that movie, it shows these caste Hindus who are coming into that community, just killing everybody. And that's a regular, occurrence. So anyway, they had all types of issues, but according to Gandhi and others, they say, you know what, your problem is just untouchability. So we'll allow you to drink from the water, we'll allow you to come into the temples, but don't say anything about raping, murder, killing, so forth and so on. And in all three cases, you have major prominent figures who they say these are the heroes you should look up to. So in India, an actual hero would be Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. Have you heard of him? Of course not. Because he was one of the actual untouchables who was fighting for the rights of the untouchables. Well, you haven't heard his name, but I'll mention someone else. Have you heard of Gandhi?
Yes.
Of course. Because your enemy has given you your hero for you, not the one who is of you, who is fighting for you, the one who is more in alignment with what works for their interests. So that's there. Then in South Africa, the main image that they pop up is who? South Africa. Exactly. Right? The Truth and Reconciliation Commission. We won't take the land back. We won't do anything. Just say what you did and then go off scot-free. Right? Oh, well, I raped 50 women. Okay, good. Thank you. Shake your hand. Go back and keep raping. Right? Oh, we stole 500,000 acres of land. Okay, thank you for telling the truth. Now go back and stay on your land. You understand? But less known are people like Robert Sobukwe. Have you heard of him? Of course not. I hope you've heard of Steve Biko. You have one. All right, good. We're on track now. So our actual heroes, the ones who we as black people should select for ourselves, we don't hear about them, but broadcast 24/7 throughout the day are the ones who they say this is who you should emulate. And when your enemies choose your heroes for you, most likely there's going to be a problem with those heroes. Then we go to the U.S. Who's the main person in civil rights who they tell you to look up to? Exactly. Because all of these are champions of just sit down next to white folks on the toilet. None of them are saying we need justice. None of them are saying we need vengeance, especially. That would be the scariest thing to them. But less known or less put out forward are people like Marcus Garvey, Malcolm X, the people who we would choose for ourselves and say these are the ones who are fighting for us, who aren't saying, they're saying let's get rid of the actual problem, right? And what it basically amounts to is we end up fighting for things like, banishing of untouchability. But Ambedkar in India, he said we need to abolish the caste system altogether. What the caste Hindus, these Indo-Aryans, they say, well, we just need to get rid of the untouchability. We'll let you come back and we'll allow you to touch us. Well, Ambedkar said we have to get rid of the entire religion of Hinduism and abolish the entire caste system. Gandhi was never down with that. He says, no, you can't do that. And then in South Africa, Steve Biko, you have the Black Consciousness Movement, who's talking about all of us black people, not anyone who happens to be on the African continent. So you have this stream of thought, they call it continentalism, which is, well, I'll give you a proverb in Chi, they say, so that means no matter how long these Dutch Boers who are on stolen land stay there, they haven't magically changed who they are. By the same token, we Africans who may be in the diaspora or anywhere else, India, wherever else, we haven't changed our essential nature just because of our location. So there are those who would have us say, oh, anyone who's on the African continent, we're cool with them. Now, I'll give you another example, Haiti versus Morocco. So about a year or two ago, Haiti applied for full membership in the AU, and they were rejected. Wow. Even though the founders in the 1900 Pan-African Conference, Henry Sylvester Williams and others, they said that we are founding this term, we are creating the term Pan-Africanism so that we can secure the rights of independent black, they said Negro nations. So they mentioned specifically by name Pan-Africanism. The word came into being because of Haiti, Liberia, and Ethiopia. Those were the three places that they mentioned. So now, when you have people who don't know any history about Pan-Africanism, now Haiti is coming in, the one who that term was invented for, and they say, no, Haiti, you're one of us, but you're not African enough. Now, fast forward to last year, Morocco applied for membership. Now, these are our very first imperialists, the very first people who came and stole our land, and they are still on stolen land, these pale Arabs, who, if you go back 5,000 years, you will read about your black African ancestors talking about how they were trying to keep them out of North Africa, how they built walls in order to keep them out, how anytime they came in, they would, seize crops, they would destroy things, so forth and so on, bring so much ruin. So this is what your African ancestors were writing about in ancient Kemet, what they now call Egypt. But how many people read those documents? But long story short, we have our very first imperialists in Morocco. They applied for membership. These people who are still enslaving black people to this very day, right now, today. Black people go there and they are being murdered, raped. Matter of fact, there were two sisters, I went to a program yesterday, and there were two sisters who, they had a flight on Royal Air Morocco, and they had to have a layover, and they were talking about how the taxi driver, as they were just sitting in the taxi, he starts moving his elbow on her leg, like, oh, they treat the black women like they're prostitutes. You understand? So she's coming from the U.S. She's like, she doesn't know what's going on. So she tried to move her leg, then he did it again, the taxi driver. And so they're just recounting all these things, what they were called, how they were treated. In Morocco, I'm saying, you don't know the history of these people. This is not this is not a new thing. This is 5,000 plus years of documented history. But if you don't know it, you just think it's a one-on-one incident. They know it. But here, history is not compulsory. Right? French is about to be compulsory, but history isn't. So you don't know anything about who you relate to or any of those things. But anyway, all of that is to say the parallel I was drawing is look at the cases. Here you have black people in Haiti, who the term Pan-Africanism was invented for, and here you have your very first Arab imperialists, right? And they allowed Morocco in, they kept Haiti out. This is what happens when you don't know who you are. You don't know who you are as a black person, as an African person, and those are synonyms. Because if you just say African, then they will say, oh, well, that's the Arabs too. Well, that's the Dutch boys. Oh, that's Aisha Huang. She's here in Africa, so she's an African too. Right? But again, we have to get to, there's a quote again from Malcolm X. He says, if a cat has kittens in an oven, that doesn't make them biscuits. I hope we understand.
Yeah.
So if an Arab comes here and steals land and then gives birth, this is still an Arab. So Gaddafi, he was trying for a pan-Arabism movement, but when he didn't get the solidarity, then he said, okay, well, let me try Pan-Africanism. These black people are stupid. They don't know who we are, so they'll do it. And of course they did, because they didn't know who these folks were. But yeah. So anyway, that's a project that we're working on. There's this Kwame Nkrumah conference that's coming up. So myself and Nana Yao, as my graduate assistant, that's some of what we're working on. But do you have any questions? I know we're...
Yes, we have some questions.
Yeah.
First of all, I'd like you to tell us about yourself. Whenever I send us the email, we see a lot about you, the subject, and we were wondering where exactly to start questioning you, but we just want you to simply tell us about yourself.
Okay, about myself, I was born in Brooklyn, New York. I was raised in Raleigh, North Carolina. All of this is, of course, in the U.S. And then I went to school in Atlanta, Georgia, at a place called Morehouse College. And then from there, I actually did a year of study abroad here. So I did my whole junior year here at University of Ghana. That's where I started learning Twi. Went back to the U.S. and then, interestingly, I had a teacher of Medu Neter. That's the ancient language, what they call hieroglyphs, right? And when I was coming back, he would be teaching all these things, and I would always make connections with the Twi language, right? I was like, oh, this concept. So the word kra in Medu Neter is ka. So I was like, oh, look at this. You know, if you say obra, as in life, they have the ba, right? If you say mra, as in law, then they have ma'at, and that is the same thing, you know, the truth, law, all these things. The first, even when they talk about the 10 Commandments, that's taken from the 42 principles of ma'at, and you can actually read those out here. We have a poster of them here in the lobby when you go. Wholly plagiarized. So they said that they can't do all 42, they can only do 10. You understand? So all these connections, he says, you know what, you have to go to graduate school for African languages so that you can link these contemporary African languages with the ancient African languages, and then contemporary ones on the continent with the diaspora and so forth and so on. So that's exactly what I did. I went to, of all places, University of Wisconsin, which is a very cold, very white place, but it was the only PhD program in African languages and literature in that country. So I went there and suffered through the cold. But I ended up getting 2 master's degrees there, one in linguistics, one in African languages and literature, focusing on historical linguistics, you know, getting some of those principles so that I can now be applying those to the connection between Medu Neter and contemporary African languages. Now there's a scholar, we're actually trying to get him here, Theophilo Benga, out of Congo, and what he does is he goes through just this, so he shows you the words in Medu Neter. So this is an owl, it's and it translates to inside, don, so inside. And then you find the same thing in various African languages. So in Twi it would be mu, it's still inside for the or you could say dam bibim, so the is still for inside. Have the same thing in Kikongo. If I say mukanda, I'm saying mu is inside, kanda, the community. So we still use the same word. So what he does is he traces all of these different words, ba for arm, and Medu Neter. Now if I talk in Twi, I could say abasa or aba, mebo abaso, right, that's aba. If I look at Yoruba, apa for arm, again, so you can go through all these languages and see how the language has changed, and not just changed like regularly. So all throughout the language, anytime you see the B here, you'll see the P there. Anytime you see this there, you'll see that. And it's across a whole set of words. So it's different from what a lot of people who aren't trained in linguistics do. They do folk etymology and say, this word looks like that word. So, okay, that's the beginning of the research. That's not the end. If you say this looks like this, then you go and systematically show this parallel across right? The form and the semantics are the same for all of these words. And then you show how it happens for all of these sound classes, right? So, and then I decided to do my PhD here in linguistics. So when I finished, I ended up getting this award, which is for the most outstanding doctoral dissertation in humanities. That was for 2012-2013. That's the Vice Chancellor's Award. And then just last year, I got this award too, which is for the best publication in the humanities. So that's the 2016 Provost Publications Award. And then, you know me from Gandhi Must Fall. Recently, Nana Akufo-Addo talked about the compulsory French, so I had something to say about that too. We need to have African languages be compulsory, as well as so many things before French, right? Even as we look at all of the research shows that learning in your mother tongue is much better for you. It allows you to understand things better, it allows you to grasp other languages better. Now we had programs here like NALAP and others, and those failed. And that's when you have all these millions of speakers, much less French, where we don't even have speakers for. You understand? We have English that's supposed to be the language that we are all, so forth and so on. But I have a colleague who did the testing for primary P3, P6 students, and their performance was abysmal on the English. You understand? Now, if the English, we can't even get that. And this is the one we say, Yajiatum da da da. Then how in the world are you going to now do French and add that on top of it? If we have all these African languages and we have the speakers for it, we have the materials for it, for Chief, for Ga, for Ewe, for the Agbani, so forth and so on. If we can't even implement that, now you're going to add that onto it. So, my point is more so that there are so many priorities that need to be before, French. And even when we look at French, if you look at Ghana, and we come down to how many people are actually really proficient in English. You understand? If you go to your village and speak to your grandmother, so Ghana is supposed to be an English-speaking nation, so we could say, oh, all 27 million are, but really, what are you actually dealing with? Same thing in Togo, same thing in Cote d'Ivoire, same thing in Benin, all these different places. Burkina Faso. So all of these are supposed to be French speaking, but when you go down on the ground, you get a different view of what is actually there. So if we are looking at interacting with Togo and Benin, that all of them are Gbe languages, which are to different degrees mutually intelligible. So Ewe, Fongbe, so forth and so on. So we could look at unifying around those types of languages. If you look at what Prof. Adams Bodomo talks about, the Mabia languages, what they call the Guru languages, so Groni, Grunsi, so forth and so on, all the way into More, the Mosi languages up in Burkina Faso. So all the way down, all of these languages are mutually intelligible. So we could use that as a basis. If we're down here, we could say, all right, let's look at all these different Akan dialects. So you have Ekwapim, you have Asante and Dinchira, so forth and so on. We can use that. And then even into Cote d'Ivoire, because you have Baoulé spoken there, you have Agni spoken there, so all of these are Akan languages. So if we were thinking in that direction, we could do something different in terms of how do we want Africa to look like 500 years from now. Most people aren't thinking about that. They're thinking about within 3 years, what are we going to do? If they're even thinking about that, most people are thinking about this evening, what am I going to eat? Dokono or fufu. But for our ancient African ancestors, they had this concept of, they're saying we build for eternity. You understand? And that is what we need to be thinking about. What's been the plight of those who have been under the French, where they put 85% of their gross national product into the coffers of France, and then they have to get their own money back in a commercial loan with commercial interest rates just to use their own money, where France comes in and topples governments, destroys, assassinates at will. So if they say, okay, Gbagbo, we don't like you anymore, you're talking about no longer kowtowing to our wishes, so we get him out. And then we bring in Ouattara. All right, Lumumba, we didn't like what you said. So Lumumba out, Mobutu Sese Seko in. You understand? So do we need more of that? That's our question. Same thing with Thomas Sankara in Burkina Faso. So we had all of these programs, anti-corruption programs, women's empowerment programs, the Great Green Wall program, all these things that were very progressive, that they assassinated him, again coming from orders from France. And when they were trying to say, look, we're going to try and find out if he was really corrupt, they found in his house he had 3 broken bicycles, a guitar, old refrigerator that didn't work. Like he would ride his bicycle to work. This is the president, right? The poorest president on the entire planet, because he didn't want any of those things. He said Burkina, these are the upright people. I mean Burkinabe, right? So, these are some of the things that, I've been working on, some of the things I've been dealing with. This year, I'm working on 10 publications. So we're in June now. I have 5 publications that are out already for this year. So the other 5 should also come out from this year. I'll also be applying for promotion by September. But yeah, I have 3 children. I'm married, of course. I have 3 children. Ama, Kwekuni, Akosia. Yeah. And they're Hacho. They have various African languages, African names from different African languages. So my oldest daughter, Ama Onyonkopombo, Ajagwe, dia Sizi, dia Silvan, Pololumungu, something with Kambon. Right? So Ama, definitely.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. Ama Onyonkopombo, Ajagwe, dia Sizi, dia Silvan, Pololumungu, something with Kambon. Right. So she has, yeah, Kambon. Yeah, she has nothing. So, we have names from various African languages, because basically, if we're saying African people need to come together, we need to live that out in various aspects of our life, and there's nothing that is more telling of that than what are you going to name your children. Now, for most people, it's a backwards forwards paradigm. Now, when I say that, what do I mean? I mean that we only think in terms of those who colonized us, and that's forward, for the village we come from, that's backward. We very rarely look laterally and say, look, we're all African people. And if it's African, it's mine, you understand? That's a very different view of what it is to be African. So usually you'll have someone like named Roland Mreku. So Roland is forward to the colonizer, and Mreku is backward, right? So even Nana Yao, that's his actual name, my graduate assistant. But this, even as you all introduce yourselves, you introduce yourself with all these white names, which to me is very shameful, very disgraceful. You are supposed to be African people, you understand? Then even when we, I'll land on the names. So this is what we're dealing with, that even if we say, all right, I'm going to be African, then we only just go back to our own village. Very rarely do we find something like Sekou and Nkrumah, where you have Guinea and Ghana, and that shows that, look, we're all African people. This is all up for us. We're African. Usually, even if we say we're going to be African, it's just really just our village. Or if we say we're going to try to transcend tribalism, then we just go straight to Britain and be Joe Ruxin or, things of that nature. So what are we really doing? It's like a horse with blinders. If you ever see horses race, they put blinders so they can only see. So we're in a situation where we're like seeing only this, and then maybe we can look between our legs and see behind, and then this is all we see. We can't do anything else. But if we can remove these blinders, then we can say, look, there's a whole African world out there that we can choose from, right? That we can get lessons from. What's the architecture like in Zimbabwe? How can we use that? They build in stone. Look at all these mountains we have right here in Ekwapim. How can we use that instead of exporting all of our cash to get concrete and cement and blah, 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 blah? You understand? Same thing in Ethiopia, they built in stone. In Kemet, that was land of the black people. That's what they call Egypt. They were building in stone. We have all of these stones in a huge mountain range right here. Is that something we could use? But we're not thinking like that. We're thinking forwards, backwards. Forwards is cement. Backwards is dirt, mud, brick. So let's go for the concrete, cement, right? But if we start understanding ourselves as Africans, then we can start saying, this is what African study from Nkrumah. You can read his speech where he gives us our mandate at the opening of, and it's right here on the door when you go. Where he says that it's not supposed to just be Ghana studies or West African studies. There's African studies, and not just the continent. It's supposed to extend to the diaspora, African people, no matter where we are. But nowadays, what we've come to is just village studies. I'll go back to my village because I want to get some banku. And then I'll have my mother sing some lullabies for me. And then I'll write that down and say, this is my African studies project. How does it relate to African people? How does it tie us together? How does it benefit us as a whole? You just got some banku and now you're fine, but what is that really doing, right? So these are some of the issues that I'm working on. So in different articles I'm writing, it's always trying to make these connections. So I have an article that shows the similarities between Kiswahili Proverbs and Akan Proverbs, and that's with the head of our Department of Modern Languages. So we call it Kiswahili. we were trying to decide, should we call it Kiswahili or Kiswahili? We said we like Kiswahili a little bit better, it sounds. But I'll give you a few examples of just such proverbs. And usually it tends to be about the same type of concept. So for example, you have Upre Wohundi Abrobea Udinobun. So as if you're in a hurry to eat a pineapple, you end up eating it green, right? So in Kiswahili, you have Mstahimilivu Hulambivu. A patient man eats ripe fruits. So it's the similar type of concept. Where it's different, we actually show where it's different in terms of the specific word. Here we're saying specifically pineapple, they're saying fruits in general. But then you have others. I'll give you another one that I think illustrates it well. So, Oyarasafon Sanihu, and I say Oyarasafon Sanihu Yanye. So the healer doesn't heal himself. And then in Kiswahili, Mganga Hajigangi. So the healer doesn't heal himself. Exact same thing, right? So you can go through and see that because we have a shared worldview as African people, we have similar concepts and proverbs to express it. There's another one that's even better. Let me see if I can find it for you. Right. Ayeba na yepa abitra for chow. That translates to, when the funeral arrives, we're polite to the palm wine tapper. And then in Kiswahili they say, Msitukane wa gema na ulevi ungaliku. It translates to, as long as drunkenness persists, one should not insult palm wine tappers. And the basic idea is that normally they're not seen as the most prestigious in society, but when you need them, that's where you have to be polite to them. You don't insult them. You understand? So similar concept and similar proverb. Now these are people who are about 4,000 plus miles away from each other, but they have the same concept. And it's not that, let me travel from Kumasi to Tanzania to find out their proverb. It's just that we have all of these similarities as African people. So the point of this is to help us to understand, look, we're all African people. I have another article talking about Black English in the US and Chi. So if you ever look at the word se, right? Se. So that's the same se as to resemble. Right? Se. So you use se in order to introduce this next thing. Right? Now if you look at Black English, they have what they call quotative like. So we introduce another quote just by saying like. And I was thinking like, I'm not gonna go. Then I told them like, you tripping, right? So you also do the same thing. So if I say you look like this person to resemble, you use the same thing. So we're showing how in both of these languages you use similar things in order to introduce quotes, and that's showing how it's systematic throughout the entire language, that this is how it is. Now you have these white linguists who said, that just started, the quotative like, it started in the 1980s. So myself and Dr. Dia in the linguistics department, we showed examples going back into the 1880s, 1890s of Black people, they were transcribing their interviews. So all of this, you can find it from a long time ago. Then we started singing like, Sally was a good gal. So they're doing the same thing to introduce a quote like, and it's the same thing that we do in Chi, se, right? So looking at all these things, but again, the idea is that when I'm working with these, I have another one that's coming out in the journal here, and that's another thing I like to try to publish here in Africa. I'm showing comparisons between Akan Anansi stories and Yoruba Ijakpa stories, and I'm using a theoretical framework from Congo, right? So in this theoretical framework, I'm showing how both of them have similar structures, how they operate in similar ways. But again, the point is what? To show, look, we're all black people, we're all African people, right? So that's a little what I'm working on.
Very interesting. Thank you very much. But I would like to know your background.
Okay.
Because for anyone who take this course or this path in life, and there are several things that influenced you to go into this path. So if you could tell us about it.
Okay, so my parents were, or still are, what I would say are African-centered revolutionaries. So they changed their names at marriage. They said instead of giving each other white wedding rings from blood diamonds and stolen gold, that they should exchange African names that they thought really encapsulated the character of the other. So they exchanged at their wedding ceremony names. So my father, Kamal Rashidi Kambon, and my mother, Mawia Rahema Kambon. So Kamal is from the Kikuyu language, translates to quiet warrior. Rashidi, friend, that's in Kiswahili. And then Kambon, you find it in Nigeria. You also find it here in Ghana. And in Ghana, that's if you go to Tamale, they have talk about the Kambon Se, the Kambon Na, and that's the warrior, class. Mawia, essence of life. Rahema is also friend or companion, and then Kambon, the same. So I was born with an African name. People always ask me, when did you change your name? I say, for those of us in other places, we're not trying to be like white people. So many of us generations ago, I've never had any European name. So people are surprised because I come to Ghana and all they have is European names. My mother is Okomfo, which is a traditional diviner here. This is in the US. And I come here and I have people who've never been to any shrine before. So I taught a course here in African Studies, Foundations of African Thought. So I took my students, all our Ghanaians, to a shrine. They said, this is my first time ever being to a shrine. I only saw it in Nollywood. I thought it should be scary. But the woman is saying Proverbs, talking about the same concepts we're discussing in class. You understand? So, I think part of it is for us to understand where we're coming from, Africans of the diaspora, and then Africans here, and, really get a chance to understand what it is to be African from both perspectives. So the major contributing factor, I would say, was my parents. I was raised in the US, but we never consider ourselves Americans. We consider ourselves African anti-Americans. So when everyone is standing up to sing the national anthem, we're sitting down in our seats. When everyone is standing up saying the Pledge of Allegiance, we're sitting down in our seats like we're paraplegics. We're not standing up for that. When, just all these things, we never celebrate white holidays or any of those types of things. So that's a little bit of my background. So when you have that type of foundation, you are unapologetically pro-black, right? Pro-African. And again, those are synonyms because we don't want to say pro-African and you start thinking about the Arabs who are on stolen land. I don't want to say African, you start thinking about the Dutch boys on stolen land. When I say African, I mean black. When I say black, I mean African. I mean the same thing in any African language that you look at. So if I say Obibini, the Bibi means black. The Ni and the O let you know it's a human being. When I say Abibimai, I'm saying land of black people. In Yoruba, if I say Ile Adulawo, Ile is land. The Du is from black. Lawo is in color. Adulawo, those who are black in color. So you're saying this is a land of those who are black in color. That means if you come across anyone who is not like that, guess what? They're an invader, right?
Yeah.
For our own worldview, when we're speaking our own languages, this is how we see it. If you look at the Bambara language, they have Farafina. And this is, again, land of black people. Brem? Hey, J4. Just a quick interview.
Would you believe after asking us to do the turning I gave the report to my ceremony for them to say that they are not doing themselves.
Okay, no problem. Tell them to have fun. Alright, so if you look at, I was mentioning in the Bambara language, Farafina, that's again land of black people. If you look at Kikongo, in Sia Bandombe, so Ndombe is black, and Si, land of Bandombe, the Ba is plural human, It's the same thing that you have in Chi even to this day. When I say Nipa Beno, Basa, Ba Nine, when you have that Ba, that's, you know, it's plural human. So we still have vestiges of that same system that you find very robustly in the Bantu languages. When you're seeing, even saying Bantu, it's coming from that same thing. So in Sia Bandombe, land of those who are black. If I go to Wolof out of Senegal, now many people eat jollof rice, but they don't know that it comes from the Jollof Kingdom, which is still there in Senegal to this day, and
Wow.
they're Wolof speakers. So it's just like the same thing as saying Fante Kenke, right? You're saying those people's Kenke. You say Bambara beans, you're saying that's those people's beans. When I say whatever I'm saying that's these people's this, these people that. So many people, they think that rice comes from China and don't know that African people domesticated the rice, and we still have it in the north, the brown rice. If you try to even get that at African Studies, we have a restaurant. If you try to get it there, they don't serve it. They only serve the white rice from China, right? So this is a problem. But anyway, saying all this, say real neat new, so that's land of those who are black. So real is land, neat, person, new, plural, new, that's black. So anytime you're looking at it, if you go to ancient Kemet, Kemet itself means land of black people. So you write it with the determinative of a circle with a crossroads in between. It's human settlement. So then it is telling you land of black people. The same thing as in all these languages. You change the determinative to a man and a woman, it now means black people. And it's not only African languages. If you say Sudan, that's what the Arabs say. They say Bilad as-Sudan. They're saying land of black people. If you look at Ethiopia, from Greek, they're saying Ethiops. They're saying burnt ops. It's the same thing. We say optical illusion, optician. It's ops. They're saying black face people. If you look at Latin, when they say Niger, right, they're saying the same thing, black people. That's where you get it, right? So all of these things, it lets you know who this land is for. So if you come across someone who doesn't look black on this land, guess what? They're not indigenous to this land, they're a recent invader. So yeah, just saying all of that to say, when I say black, I mean African. When I say African, I mean black, because I'm thinking in African languages. I'm conceptualizing the world as my African ancestors conceived of the world.
And so how were your school days like? When, especially when you came here, and also when you were in the United States, what differences did you find? What things did you find that were good, and any similarities, any good things you can bring back, or anything you can just
Okay. Well, from very young, you know, there was a scholar named Carter G. Woodson. He has a book called Miseducation of the Negro. That's his most famous book. And he also started what at that point in time was called Negro History Week. And then it grew up to be Black History Month. And there are those who advocate that Black history needs to be 365, 24/7, Black History Year, Black History everything. That I grew up with that. So I remember in first grade they had elementary school. That's the same thing as primary. So for the whole primary they had tests where they tested on knowledge of Black history. So I won the blue ribbon prize for most knowledge. So I'm like 5 or 6. But I thought it's stuff that everybody knows. But of course I have parents who are very unique in many ways, but not unique because you have people in other places where I happen to be. You don't have many people like that at that point in time, but in places like New York, more cosmopolitan areas, people who, you know, are more forward thinking, you have a lot of that type of thing. But I would say, you know, getting that type of Black history from very young, it helped me to have, you know, a foundation on which to build. And I think that that's what's lacking here. People don't know very much about Africa at all, or themselves as Africans at all. And I always start off Intro to African Studies just asking some very basic things. Like the world's first multi-genius in the world, do you know who it was? Most of them don't know. The very first multi-genius in the history of the entire planet Earth was here in Africa. And they say, oh really? I didn't know that. That's Imhotep. You can look him up. Right? The world's first medical text in the history of the entire planet Earth was written right here in Africa, right? The called the Kambon gynecological papyrus, right? But we don't hear about this. The world's first mathematical instrument in the history of the entire planet Earth, 35,000 years ago, the Limbombo, right? Showing you prime numbers, multiplication, division, all of these things. And it's on the fibula of a baboon, and it's also thought to represent the woman's menstrual cycle. So we're tying all these things to the moon. So the menses, even when you're saying that, you're talking about the moon, basically. And that cycle is the reason why you need to develop calculation, the reason why you need to develop mathematics for that purpose. So they did it on the fibula of a baboon because the baboon was always associated with the moon because it howls at the moon. So they're letting you know by us making these marks of the prime numbers and all these things, it's letting you know that we are clear on why we're doing it. This represents the moon, the bone itself, but then the mathematical notations on it also represent the moon, and it's for calculating the menses. And then the second oldest mathematical instrument on the face of the earth is also from right here in Africa, 22,000 years old. 22,000, that's a long time. I'm not saying 200 years, I'm saying 22,000 years ago, your ancestors were doing all these advanced mathematical concepts. And of course, I asked my students, have you heard of this? No, they haven't heard of it. Well, when would they have heard of it? It's not in primary curriculum. What they learn about is Julius Caesar and Napoleon Bonaparte and Queen Victoria and all these random white folks who have nothing to do with anything. But you don't hear about the most important people on the face of the planet Earth. The world's first physician in the history of the entire world, right here in Africa, right? Hesira, contemporary of Imhotep, right? The world's first female physician, also right here, Merit Patel, right? And then also the second, Pesachet. So all of these things, so now you have people say, oh, we need women's empowerment in Africa. That means you don't know anything about your past. It means that you were here and now you're down to here. So you think you go up one little tick and now that's empowerment. No, you're not anywhere close to where you were. The world's first outright ruler, female outright ruler, right here in Africa, right? But again, when I ask my students, have you heard of this? That's Nefertiti. They say, oh, I've never heard of her. Then after her, you have Sobek Neferu. They never heard of her. The most famous female ruler, Hatshepsut. They say, oh, did you sneeze? I say, no, I'm telling you the name of your great ancestor who built one of the world's most geometrically perfect temples in the history of the entire planet Earth. All these colonnades. I actually got a chance to go there and take pictures in front of it. I'll show you. Matter of fact, that's what just popped up on my screensaver. So this is me standing in front. Actually, let me pull it up. Of this exact same temple. And then we can also go into other female rulers from Merowe, such as Shanak Dakete, such as Amani Renas, such as Amani Sheketo, and so forth and so on. But when I mention these names, they've never heard of any of them. The most important human beings ever to walk on the face of the planet, if I say the first outright ruler of any nation state on the entire planet Earth, do you think that's an important person? Yes. Objectively speaking, it's important. So how come that's not in your curriculum? Because she's a black African, right? But then if I mention Queen Victoria, oh yes. Well, what's more important? The very first female outright ruler on the history of the entire planet Earth was some random syphilitic white woman up in the butt crack of Europe. How is that important? So, once we are able to, put these things in perspective, then we start to understand, why was this information intentionally kept from us, right? Who was scared that if we know about this information that it would do something, perhaps it would dislodge their place on the planet Earth? So I'll show you some of these images. Yeah.
So while you are looking for the pictures.
Yeah.
Wow.
This is carved into the side of a mountain, right? By the outright ruler, not like a queen to a king. She was the outright ruler, right? And she looked a little bit like my sister. And all of these are carvings of her. And before there were more, but when white folks come, they knock them down, they steal them. So these are just a few ones that are remaining, carved into the side of a mountain. This means that all of this used to be a mountain. They carved it perfectly into all of these things. So when you see these columns, you'll think, oh, that's like Rome or Greece.
Yeah.
At the time we were doing this, there was no Rome in existence. There was nothing called Greece. You understand? And the Greeks, they came to us and to learn. So even if you read the Laws by Plato, he talks about how to get a real education to make you more human, you have to go to Kemet, right? Because he laments that Greek education is education for pigs. He calls it guzzling swine. Let me actually give you a quote from him. Yes, he says, this is Plato, who they say, oh yes, we need to look up to these Greeks and whatever. So according to Plato, he talks about, one ought to declare then that the freeborn children should learn as much of these subjects as the innumerable crowd of children in Egypt learn along with their letters, right? So he's saying what we should do in Greece is what they're doing in Egypt. Then he talks about how when he looks at Greek education in comparison to that, he says, my dear Clinias, when I was told quite lately of our condition, talking about the Greeks, in regard to this matter, I was utterly astounded myself. It seemed to me that the condition of guzzling swine than of human beings. Their education is education for pigs, not for human beings. To be a real human being, you have to come and study in Africa from the jet black African people, which again, Kemet means land of black people. And I was ashamed not only of myself, but of all the Greek world. That's according to Plato, who they tell you should clap your hands for. And then you can read Aristotle as well, where he says, why are the Ethiopians and Egyptians bandy-legged? It is because the bodies of living creatures become distorted by heat like logs of wood when they become dry. The condition of their hair supports this theory, for it's curlier than that of other nations, and its curliness is, as it were, crookedness of the hair. So he's saying that the Ethiopians, who we know, and the Egyptians at that point in time, not the ones who are invaders, right? Because you had all these invasions that drove your ancestors out of that place. This is why we're talking about North Africa is occupied territory. So you had the invasions of the Hyksos, of the Assyrians, of the Persians, of the Greeks, of the Romans, we have the Vandals, right? This is Commonwealth called the Vandals. That was an invading force who came into Kemet and destroyed so many things and carried them off. And now we have black people who are calling themselves the names of their enemies because they don't know any history. You understand? Would you call yourself the name of one of your worst enemies? Only if you don't know who you are. Then you'll call yourself all these white names that we have. Oh, I'm Bob. I'm John. I'm Priscilla. And there are more. Herodotus also goes into these things. Diodorus Siculus, and all of them basically went to Kemet and talked about how all of these people are black people, that they're the first people, that they invented mathematics, invented laws, so forth and so on, so forth and so on. And actually gave a handout. We did a lecture where Theophil Obenga, the same scholar I mentioned before, he reads the Greek text, so he goes through word for word what the Greeks are saying, right? Because the Greeks, they weren't in on the scam. This is a modern day scam to make you think that the Greeks were everything and you never did anything. The Greeks, the people at this point in time didn't go back and inform the Greeks that they should corroborate that lie. So the Greeks were very clear. They said, we learned all of this. Solon, the lawgiver, he came and studied. Thales, the first philosopher, he came to Africa to study. Plato, all of these folks, they're saying before you can be anything, you have to come to Africa to study. Right, the very first universities are called Per Ankh, right? And the text that the Bible is written based on is coming from this book, the Peret Em Heru. Peret Em Heru. So Peret, this is the same as the word pied, like to go up. That's in, it's the same as mu in Chi. Then heru is the same as saying oria. So to go out by day is the basic idea. And if you are able to read it, and I actually have a study group where I show people how to read it, you'll find out where they plagiarized the Bible from. Because the idea of Holy Trinity, you'll find it in here. The idea of death and resurrection, you'll find it here. Of the Savior, all of these things, you'll find it here. Right?
Wow.
But how many people know how to read this? Where would you learn? Here in Africa, it's very difficult, but you would have to go to Chicago, to the Oriental Studies. You would have to go to Oxford, to SOAS. So all of these white people are learning and reading about our things. However, African people don't learn anything about it. All they learn is the plagiarism of the Bible, 50% plagiarism, 50% lies, to tell you, oh, guess what, you're Egypt enslaved Israelites and blah, 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 blah. So even if you get a chance to go and read what your own ancestors wrote, you say, no, I don't want to read it, because they were bad, right? So that means that they've spoiled your brain before you've even gotten anywhere, that your ancestors carved deep into stone just so you could read the actual history, but you don't want to learn anything about it. What you want to do is go along with what these white people gave you, right? And also we go into, the Holy Trinity. That's what I mentioned before. And the very first concept of Holy Trinity was Asar, Aset, and Heru. So it's the Father, the Mother, and the Child. So as you will notice is that the modern form of Christianity took out the woman, because Europeans see women as being evil, from Eve to Delilah and all these, so forth and so on. But the original version of Christianity was, again, plagiarized from the concept from Kemet. So they still have the Holy Mother, so forth and so on. That's Aset. That's before they removed the woman from out of the concept of Trinity. So if you even go to Europe to this day, you'll still find all these images of Mary and Jesus as being black, right? Good. So that's a step in the right direction before we ultimately get to, so this is all throughout Europe. You can see, if you just type in Black Madonna, you find some in Czechoslovakia, some in the Vatican. So this is the original concept of Aset and Heru. This is the original concept of Mary and Jesus, and then this is the one that they brought to you. So if you come to understand they have all these images of black Jesus in Europe, then you have to start asking, well, why when they came to enslave and colonize you, did they leave the black ones behind and they only brought you the white ones? What did they plan on doing to your mind? You understand? So if you're in Europe, you can't go 10 feet without stumbling over a black Madonna and child. Matter of fact, this will probably trip you out. I'll show you images of the Pope kissing the black Mary and black Jesus. Matter of fact, when they are going to be installed as a new Pope, they go and pray in front of the black Mary. So this is where they pray, and this is the old Pope and the new Pope praying in front of the black Mary. This is him kissing the black Mary and Jesus, right? Because that's the original one. So if you want to do something powerful, you better do it like the original one that you stole it from, that you plagiarized from. So you can go to your Pope all around these black Marys, black Jesus. But the Portuguese who came here to Ghana, they were Catholics. So why didn't they bring you the same black one that the Pope to this very day is still praying to? That will help you to understand why they brought you Christianity, not to save your soul, but rather to make you a better slave. And that's why the very first church is in the dungeons of enslavement, right? It's not a contradiction, it's consistent. They say we'll enslave you physically and then enslave you mentally and spiritually, right? And then going back into the plagiarism, there's a good book called Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization. I have it in soft copy here, but I also have the hard copy that I'm going to have sent very soon, because this is information that everyone should know this. This is like basic, this is like elementary school, primary school type of information that you build on the basics from there. But this in Nile Valley Contribution to Civilization, he actually goes into line by line showing where they plagiarized. So the Akhenaten's hymn, Akhenaten is often given credit as the very first inventor of, we can say, exclusionary monotheism, even though you can find monotheism in Kemet even before that, in the book of Coming Forth by Day, the same text. I'll show you. And this is a book by Anthony Browder. Now, if you let me go on, I'll just tell you everything that I think you need to know. So you can, after this, you can ask me any pointed questions that you may have. But again, he goes into this. So this is Amenhotep IV, Akhenaten. And then he'll show you the lines. So this is 300 years before the Bible, and it shows you where they plagiarized from. Now, if you do this as students, you will get kicked out of school. If you steal someone's work and you don't say where you got it from, that's plagiarism. But that's what the Bible is, plagiarism. So here, the world is in darkness like the dead. Every lion cometh forth from its den, all serpents sting, darkness reigns. So thou makest the darkness, and it is night, wherein all beasts of the forest do creep forth. The young lions roar after their prey. When thou risest in the horizon, the darkness is banished. Then in all the world they do their work. The sun riseth, man goeth forth unto his work, and into his labor until the evening. All trees and plants flourish. The trees of the Lord are full of sap. The birds flutter in the marshes, wherein the birds make their nests. All sheep dance upon their feet. The high hills are a refuge for the wild goats. So you see they got a mistranslation. They're not good at plagiarizing. They're stealing our things. But they should have translated as sheep. That's what the original said. The ships sail upstream and downstream alike. The fish in the river leap up before thee, and thy rays are in the midst of the great sea. So is this great and wide sea, wherein are thing creeping innumerable, both small and great and beasts. There go the ships, just like how we talked about the ships. How manifold are thy works. Thou didst create the earth according to thy desire, men, all cattle, all that are upon the earth. O Lord, how manifold are thy works. That one they got well. In wisdom hast thou made them all. The earth is full of thy creatures, and it goes on and on. If you go to Proverbs, that's the book of Amenemope, A-M-E-N-O-P-E, Amenemope. So you can find out where they got their Proverbs from, because they stole it wholesale from your ancient African ancestors. Now, this is very easy to learn and very easy to verify, but how many people are even interested? We're interested in clicking likes on Facebook and things that don't matter, when we should be using our time to actually learn what our ancestors carved in stone, so we would never forget. Carved in stone, so that you, the descendants, would know, right? And I'll give you that text. Yeah, but if you have anything specific, I can answer any specific questions you have. Otherwise, I can just keep going. Mm-hmm.
When I was 6, I watched
So this is, imagine, who do you think is a white person who has accomplished a lot? A white person who is often cheered as having accomplished a lot of things, who they revere or anything like that. Can you give me an example? All right, let's take George Washington. Let's imagine that this is their greatest hero, who they would look up to. Now let's say I make a movie and show him to be a rapist, which he actually was, to be a slave owner, which he actually was, and all these things. Now in this case, I'm actually showing what he actually did, but imagine that I say, oh, he's just a mass murderer, blah, 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 blah. This is the equivalent. They know that Imhotep is the world's first multi-genius, but look what they do to your heroes. You understand? To the point that they've already spoiled your mind from childhood, so that when you can work, this when I say multi-genius, he built the world's first monumental stone structure. There was nothing like that on the face of the entire planet before. So that's architecture. He also wrote one of the world's oldest medical papyri. You understand? So not only did he do architecture, he was also a brilliant physician. Then in addition to that, he became vizier. He rose from being a commoner to that's the position equivalent to what we would say as prime minister today. So he also was schooled in statecraft. He was the world's first multi-genius on the face of the entire planet. But look at what your white enemies have done. Look at what your white enemies have done. Now, if you didn't know he was black, just look at what they did. Now you know he's black. Because they're not making a movie about Benjamin Franklin like that. They're not making a movie about George Washington like that. But look at what they will do to all of your African heroes. So it goes back to what we were talking about with Gandhi and so forth and so on. That their heroes are your enemies. Right? Their heroes are your enemies. And your heroes are their enemies. Right? So they know very well who Imhotep was because they stole so many statues, and many of them you can only find them in the Louvre and in the British Museum. Right? They have all these documents they translated, but you'll never hear an uproar from white Egyptologists and say, this is wrong, this is wrong. I said, no, good job. Keep lying to the black people. Keep them worshiping the white image of Jesus, right? And this was the other point I wanted to come to. So even the Jesus story is plagiarized from the story of Heru, but even that is only an allegory for the movements of the sun. So when they're talking about Heru, that is just a manifestation of the sun. So you have what's called Asar, that's the father, Aset is the mother, and then Heru is the son. And Asar was represented by these 3 stars. If you've ever seen Orion, they call it Sah or Sahu in ancient Kemet. So these 3 stars in a belt is the easiest thing to recognize in the sky. If you don't know anything else, you'll see, look at these 3 stars, they look like they're in a line. Now those 3 stars are representing the father, that's Asar. And those 3 stars, if you look, they'll point to the brightest star that you can see in the sky, that in ancient Kemet they call Sopdet, and what Europeans now they call Sirius, right? And that was associated with the mother, which was Aset, that's the one who the Pope is kissing, right? So here's the father, these 3 stars, then those point to the mother, that's Sopdet, Aset. And on December 25th, they point to where the sun will rise, that's Heru, the sun. Right, so when you're celebrating the birth of the sun, what you're actually doing is celebrating the birth of the sun, the real sun, right? So all of these things were just stories to help you understand celestial phenomena. Now, the place where the sun rises at that is called the winter solstice. That there's a temple called Ipet Sut, what they call Karnak Temple today, and at that temple there's this whole colony that comes down to what they call the Holy of Holies, and where the sun rises, only on that day it goes perfectly between these huge stone columns and it shines directly into the Holy of Holies. Now, do you know what type of science and mathematics it takes to be able to calculate all these huge monumental stones? Matter of fact, somebody just posted this on a site and I can actually show you that sunrise.
But more and more Christians are becoming aware that Jesus was not born on the 25th.
Now, even when you go into Jesus was not born on the 25th, you also have to come to Jesus was not born at all. His entire story was plagiarized from the story of Heru. So if you go to that same Ipet Sut, you'll find everything about the annunciation of his birth, the impregnation by the so-called angel, Jehuti. It goes through every single step in his life story before he was born. So if he ever actually existed, he would go back in time and say, look, my whole story is here, right? So this is what I'm getting at, is that this entire story is not about a person. It's about what you can look at every single year on this time. So you have to ask yourself, why did they choose the 25th? Because that was the actual date that all of these things were coming about, right? But I want to, oh yeah, here we go. So what more Christians need to come or become aware of is what where the original story came from, because if you actually knew what it meant. Okay, no problem, no problem. Hmm?
Please, are you a Christian?
No, absolutely not. The Christianity and knowledge do not go hand in hand. You can't know things and be Christian at the same time.
So you are.
What you would probably refer to as a traditionalist, what I would refer to as an African. So this is what I'm showing you. Hopefully it comes up. You can see it here too. So on the solstice, these are all these white people. You won't find any black people because we don't even know about it. But on December 25th, the sun rises up right here between these columns. Each one of these are multi-ton blocks, if every one a ton or more. And it comes up right in between these, and then it shines directly into the Holy of Holies, where Amen, the statue of Amen was. If you pray and at the end of your prayer you say Amen, you're talking about the one who this temple is built for. Right? This was the largest spiritual temple in the history of the entire planet Earth. And it was built to the major deity Amen. So even when you say Kwamena, or if I greet you and you respond back Ya Amen, this is the same Amen. This is the same Amen that you hear in Nyame. Right? So again, everybody knows about this. Look at all these folks who are coming here on the 25th to look at the sun rising. Meanwhile, you're under a tree trying to get presents from an imaginary white man called Santa Claus, right? So they know what the original meaning is, but all these black people don't know. They're praying to the original black one because Heru was depicted as black. Of course, his mother was depicted as black. Osar was depicted as black. They call him the Lord of Perfect Black, because the idea is that once you strive to perfection, then you become black. So when you add all the colors together, when it's complete, that's when you have blackness, right? So this is hopefully in the future, instead of sitting under a Christmas tree and opening gifts from an imaginary white man, you will go and find what the actual story means, because all of the stories that we would give is to, let's say, democratize knowledge, for lack of a better word, so that everyone, as soon as they learn the story, now they already understand what's going on in the cosmos. They understand creation, right? And that's the sunrise. Only on this day. That's a lot of science and mathematics to do this, right? Nowadays, if I'm going upstairs here in Ghana, these are the black people who made this. If I go upstairs in Ghana, they don't even measure it. All right, one step is this high, the next step is that high, and you trip. This is what happens when you don't know history.
Yes. In your class once,
Oh, really?
you were talking about.
You look familiar.
You were talking about theories. You said.
This is the Ankh. This is where they stole the cross idea from, right? So the top represents the womb, the bottom represents the phallus, and then the sides represent the children who come out. So it means when feminine and masculine come together, that is life. That's Ankh. In Chi they call it Nkwan, right? Now we have a similar concept among the Akans, and you can find this on gold weights. When we go out, I'll show you the gold weight chart that has this. Have you seen this before? If you were in my class, maybe I showed you. Or maybe you don't remember. you are texting on WhatsApp to your boyfriend.
No, you were teaching us about the movie we
Okay.
You were talking about theories. You said when you came to Ghana, you wanted to learn about African studies, but when you came, we were actually learning about Plato and all. So you wanted to develop your own theory. I want to learn about that.
Yeah, we have a course now which is the exact opposite of that terrible course that I took at that point in time. This one's called Foundations of African Thought, and I record them, I put them online. So far we've had probably about 10,000 or more people who have viewed those classes.
On YouTube.
Yeah, it's on YouTube. It's also on Abibitumi Kasa, which is the Black social networking site. So this one is the exact same concept that you have here. You haven't seen this before? Do you want to hazard what the name may be? Something like that is called Mramwa. So what this is at one point in time they would use gold dust, right? That's why we call it sika, because they had sika puchu, which is a gold dust. So you would lay this on one side of the scale, then you would measure out the equivalent amount of gold on the other side. That lets you know, oh, from this I can buy a goat, or from this I can buy a sheep. But all of these, they would have proverbs and ideas associated with this one. And this one is called Erade Nyankopon. Erade Nyankopon. And the idea is that the triangle represents the womb, which is feminine. So Erade is a triangle, that's feminine. And then Nyankopon, this represents the sperm inside of the womb, that's representing the masculine. Right, so to be a creator, you have to have both feminine and masculine. And this is the African concept of the creator. The European concept is man is good and woman is evil, so therefore God has to be a man. And Eve has to be the one who brought about the downfall. That's a very white concept. That's also why they had to take out the mother from the Trinity. Say Father, Son, Holy Ghost. If it's you, me, and you in a room and we try to give birth to a baby, we will suffer. It's telling you where they got it from. Because originally it was a woman. So why don't you just say it's a woman? Because look at the white worldview. They're from caves where only the strong survive. Might makes right, you understand? Survival of the fittest. So therefore what's good is being strong and I have a bigger club than you. Bam. Right? As opposed to this idea of complementarity. So if you look at various African concepts of creator, it's always complementarity. So ata na nyongmo, right? Ata, father, na, mother, nyongmo. If you look at Mau Sogbolisa, so Mau is a feminine, Sogbolisa is the masculine. You can go all throughout the continent, and anytime we're talking about a creator, look at Erade Nyankopon. But now, if I say Erade Nyankopon, they'll picture a white man, right? Now, at the time we were dealing with gold dust, there was no image of a white man when we were saying Erade Nyankopon. If you go to Britain, the ones who colonized us, if you go to the street and say Erade Nyankopon, they'll say, what language are you speaking? They still don't know the word to this day. You understand? So this is our own indigenous word and our own indigenous concept, but they've used their concept to obliterate our indigenous concept of the creator. Now if you go to Kemet, it's the same thing, feminine and masculine coming together. That is the creator. That's what creates life, right? So they have Amen and Mut. So the temple I showed you, the sunrise in, that's a temple to Amen. If you go down to the southern temple, that's a temple to Mut, which was his wife, and they're seen as complements. When I say complement, it means that this is not complete yet. Only when the two come together are they complete. It's not complement like, oh, I like your shirt today. It's complement, as in to complete the other. And this is an African concept of the creator, right? And that's what we talk about in terms of one of the core ideas of African thought. And this is going back to the core. So in Foundations of African Thought, we'll go into these major ideas that are the fundamental basis of what we do as African people. Because, I could say, oh, you all pour libation with palm wine, and you people pour with corn flour, and you pour with this. But what's the fundamental idea why we're all pouring libation? You understand? Once you get to that very fundamental basis, then you understand what you have in common. You can go back to Kemet 5,000 years ago, you'll see carved in the wall people pouring libation, right? And then you can understand this is why we do this. This is what's actually going on, as opposed to like a bunch of disconnected rituals that you don't understand, that you need to go get schnapps from a white man in order to do. That's not what it was originally about. So it's going well. The course is going well. Students are enjoying it. Yeah.
You also spoke about being an African and having things of your roots. And you told us you don't wear anything European like. And you said your phone was made in Africa.
Yeah, but unfortunately the company just shut down, RLG. So I still have my phone, but I will now have to get my phone from Nigeria because they're no longer operating in Ghana. They're operating in Nigeria. And one of the challenges is what's in the U.S. we have what we call the syndrome of the white man's ice is colder. That means if I can get it from a black man and get it from a white man, I'll find any excuse to go and get it from the white man. It's the same ice. I said, no, his ice is colder. Look. Oh, look at how cold it is, right? This is a situation. So even when you have Samsung tablets that explode and blow up your airplane, you will still go to it because look, if it's coming from some Eurasian, then it must be better. But this is the end result of giving you a white Jesus. The idea is to make you hate yourself and hate anything that you produce, right? So all of these things are just symptoms of the same underlying disease. So if we look at skin bleaching cream by itself, it's just, oh, we don't understand it. But if you understand it in how does self-hatred serve an economic purpose, right? Once you hate the color of your skin, now you have to go to someone to get chemicals to make it look like a pig, right? Once you hate the texture of your hair, now you need to go to someone, the same person who taught you to hate the color of your hair, in order to get the chemicals to make it like a dog or a horse or anything but a human. We have human hair. All other mammals have that type of texture hair. You understand? Or what we could call fur. So all of these things are intentional things. So they're sowing the seeds with this image of white Jesus, and now they're reaping the benefits. It'll make you say, why would I wear clothes made by African people? You understand? Not to talk about anybody specifically, but if I go all throughout Legon campus or all throughout Ghana, what we're doing is sending billions in aid to the West from a choice. So it's not every single thing we produce, but the few things we do produce, we could use that in order to start producing everything else that we don't produce, right? So every time I go around campus, I see what people are wearing. I see billions of dollars that have gone to support someone else. And I picture all the smooth roads in the US, and I say we bought that because we said we don't want to wear this, we want to wear what they do. Now imagine all the bumpy roads that we have around. Imagine what the billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars, if not trillions, just in clothes. I haven't touched on any other stuff, just the clothes. Do you think your roads would be a little bit better? You would be in flying cars. You wouldn't even care about the roads. But you know, this is the end result. This is what they were hoping for. So the actual colonization was not what their goal was. Their goal was later on we'll be doing KFCs. Later on we'll be doing Pizza Huts. That's where the real benefits are, because we don't have to administrate it ourselves. We'll get the black people to say, you know what? Everything I just happen to like and value just happens to enrich my enemies. All right? Then you come to understand that none of this is happenstance, that you just happen to like what you like. It's all been calculated, which is why advertising is a multi-billion-dollar industry, because they know what they're doing to your brain. You understand? To make you like the things that you like. When you're looking at movies, they're knowing when you see product placement in movies, this is multi-billion-dollar industry, because they know that they are manipulating your choices to make you say, oh, I just like this thing. That also enriches my enemies. But how many of us even know that we have enemies?
So with this, are you embarking on any awareness something on campus?
What I'm doing here. Yeah, we also have a study group. So this ancient language of Medu Necha, I do a free study group open to the public on Fridays at 2. You're welcome to come. So Fridays at 2 on campus upstairs in seminar room 1. Right. So we have a good director who says, yes, you should teach these things, because how many of us got a chance to learn them, right? But once you can read, so all the things I'm telling you, you could verify it, but the best way to verify is to go and read it yourself. But when I show it to you, you may just say, look at the pretty pictures. Right? But this is the origin of the Latin script. So the origin of writing. There's archaeologist Gunter Dreyer who tested these bone and ivory tags and came up with dates of over 3,400 BCE. That's 5,400 years ago. That's the oldest writing, even predating Mesopotamia and everywhere else, right? So we invented writing, but what did our ancestors write? It's one thing to just pat ourselves on the back and say, yes, we did well. But what did we write down?
Yeah.
Our ancestors wrote all these things down. When I was in that temple, Ipetsut, it means the most selective places. There's not an inch where there's not something written. Everywhere you go, there's something written, right? And this is what your ancestors carved, sometimes 4, 5, 6 inches or more deep into stone, so that you would always have it. Now, if you're a student and you write something on paper, you want your teacher to read it. You just wrote it on paper. How much more a multi-ton stone that I drag and then carve deep into it just so that you, the descendants, will know what's going on? Right? So that's one thing that I do for awareness. I also teach a form of self-defense called capoeira, and I'll give you some of the flyers on the front of the door. I also have a website which is over 7,000 members, where we go into various things: African languages, African-centered education, health, psychology, and so forth and so on. And there's an app for the phone too, so you can do all of this on the go. So every single thing that I do is around this. I don't do anything that's not related to the regeneration of African people.
So what are the difficulties you've encountered in this? Because I'm very sure some of the things you are telling us here to the wider population will be either controversial, heretical, even, I don't know, blasphemous, but you've been able to do this, and you've also given us evidence. And what are the challenges you faced?
Yeah, so there are 3 major things going on. There's miseducation, diseducation, and anti-education. So the miseducation is being told the wrong thing. That's the Mummy movie, right? So we'll let you hear the name Imhotep, but we'll tell you all the wrong things about him, right? Even though the ones who are making the movie know all the right stuff, because it's in their museums. They've translated, they have all these places where you get your PhDs in Egyptology at Brown University, University of Chicago, Oxford. So they know all the texts. But what are they producing for you? That's miseducation. Diseducation is making sure that you don't even hear any of the names, right? So if I start telling you Merit Ptah, who is that? That's diseducation, right? If I say Pesachet, who is that? These are the first and second women physicians in the history of the entire planet Earth. As women, do you think that's something that you would want to know? Over 4,000 years ago, right? So that's diseducation. Some very important figures, but you'll never hear about them. What we will tell you about is just random white folks, right? That's another. And then anti-education. This is that you've gone so long without hearing anything true that you've built your castle on sand, shaky foundations, and you don't want to blow your castle away. You don't want to start over again. So now you kick against any real knowledge, right? So that's the other thing. So when we had Gandhi Must Fall, we had colleagues right across the hall who started Gandhi Must Stand. Yeah, that's here, and was supposed to be African Studies, but apparently they didn't get the memo that this is African Studies. They thought it was anti-African studies, so they're fighting against African people. Just like Gandhi did, ironically enough, he became a sergeant major fighting against the Zulus in South Africa. This your peaceful guy was a warrior, and he wanted guns. He says, come and get us some guns so that we can shoot up these Zulus. So, even when they're presented with Gandhi's own words about what he did against the Zulus in South Africa, even when they're presenting with the information about what he did against the black people, the Dalits in India, they've come to understand the white man said that this is my hero, therefore he's my hero. I don't want to hear anything else. Blah, 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 blah. Don't tell me nothing, right? So this is a major challenge. However, we are looking forward to Brim. Are you the photographer?
Yes, exactly.
Wonderful. You look very photographericious. And then, so we've been talking a lot about ancient things, but even modern things, that when we talk about the internet that we use, this high-speed internet, fiber optic technology was also invented by a Ghanaian. Are you aware?
No.
Robert Mensah. You can even see his interviews. Shall I show you? Write down the name Robert Mensah.
Robert Mensah, the one who was the goalkeeper. He was killed.
Not the goalkeeper.
Killed Coach Stadium. Robert Mensah. Wow.
Let me see. You have to type in Robert Mensah fiber optics. No, sorry, Thomas. Dr. Thomas Mensah. Robert Mensah is the goalkeeper. So Dr. Thomas Mensah, father of fiber optics in his own words. So you can see him being interviewed on Voice of America. So America knows about it, but how about Ghanaians? I have a room full of Ghanaians who don't know about this inventor of fiber optics, but Voice of America knows about the Ghanaian who invented fiber optics. That's him. Wow, he's black. Wow. I didn't know black people did anything. I thought they just sat around and... Yeah. So there are so many inventors. Matter of fact, when you go upstairs, you'll see a whole poster that shows an entire city, and it shows that all of these inventions in the city are made by black people, and it shows the patent numbers that they have so that you can verify, cross-reference, and check on their inventions that they did. So when we look at ancient past, this is diseducation. So this is coming back to the question of some of the challenges. Ancient past, we are either miseducated, diseducated, or subjected to anti-education. Even our recent, what's going on now. Now picture a situation where you spend your entire life. I don't know what you all are studying. What are you studying? Biomedical engineering, medical science and English, geography. Now, the very first map in the history of the entire planet Earth was invented by an African, right? Biomedical engineering, the oldest medical text in the history of the entire planet Earth, right here in Africa. Were you taught this in any of your courses? Were you weren't taught this? And not only that, if you just do a search for it, it's called the Turin Papyrus map, and it's a south up map, right? That means on your map, south is at the top, and that's how all the inventors, the black people who invented map making, put south at the top, and that's how they stayed until some random white people decided that they want Europe to be on top, right? That should be your very first class at 100 level, right?
So how the world look like?
I was told that the first map was...
So when I was 10.
No.
Okay.
This is not secret information. You can see a picture of it, and then it's even on Wikipedia. Considered the oldest surviving map of topographical interest from the ancient world, and this is what it looked like, and it's a south up map. The world's oldest surviving geological map, and this is from 3150 BCE, right? So before that you had drawings in caves and other things. This is an actual map to show you how to get to a place, all of these things, right? Right here in Africa. This should be your very first class. So even when we talk about how so many things are upside down, right? Literally. Because, imagine the way he has his camera is right side up. But imagine he says, I don't like Dr. Kambon being right side up, and then he just flips the camera upside down. This is the image of the map that we have. It's a flipped upside down camera. The earth is doing what it's doing. Nothing is changing with the earth, but the perspective, you understand? To make Europe look right in the center. So you have the Mercator projection map that makes Europe look huge. And the US look huge, and Canada look huge, and Russia look huge. Then it makes Africa look like anything. What does that do to you psychologically? When you start to think about it, then you'll come to understand why they did that in the first place, right? So the very first map is a south up map invented by your African ancestors, right? This is what I'm talking about, the miseducation, the diseducation, the anti-education. What are you studying? psychology. We can go into that one too. So concepts of the Ka, of the Ba, of the Sahu, all of these were indigenous African concepts. You can still find parallels in various African languages when we're talking about the Sun Sun, so the Hong Hong when you're talking about the Kra, that what is going on in the interactions between these. Well, go ahead. Russian. I hope.
Russian.
So who is the most famous literary person in Russian? Very good. What do you know about Pushkin?
I did a course on last year.
So what do you know about Pushkin in relation to black people?
Black people.
Mm-hmm.
His writing was anti-monarchist, was against the system, that's the political system that existed in Russia. He and his whole cohort, the writers at that time.
Did you know that Pushkin was black?
I've heard of it.
Okay.
I like to mention it.
Okay. Because that's when I'm saying, what do you know about him in relation to black people? That's what Yeah, so these are some of the challenges, is that we are starved of information about ourselves. And then when we are starved, then we see, well, what is the end result of that? The end result of that is Captain Muhammad. You understand? When you are never taught to value black life, then you just treat it like anything. But let that be a white man who has a gun and he's running through the wherever. Do you think he'll be lynched? Do you think he'll be lynched? Because you were taught very clearly that white lives matter. And now how did they get that lesson to you? That anytime a white life is touched, they will broadcast it on the news. Manchester, this is all you'll hear. But meanwhile, Boko Haram, it's just black people. Right? In France, if there's an attack, we have to shut down everything. Facebook will put black stickers all over everything. Even the concept of black, that's something that we need to go into as well over time. But all of these things, they're telling you white lives matter. If a black person does something to a white person, they will blow you apart. You understand? But vice versa, they're telling you black lives don't matter, and this is what the end result is. So then you internalize that. So here's a black man, military man who's jogging along. Then you take a block and slam it into his head because he's just an African, and African people never did anything. So who cares? But what if you start to know the things that you did do? Then you start to value your own life. You understand?
Some people would say African studies is about doing everything. African studies is about learning all the world did against Africa. So why don't you just move on? Why don't you just forget all these things and just move on? Because blacks were the first people to do a lot of things. But then are they the people who continued them? Do you think we can live in the world alone with blacks? Can we get reparations for what has happened? There was the slave trade. No amount of money from the West can pay for the harm they did to Africa. So we should just let go and move on. There's also this conception that Africans like playing the victim. And so we are stuck in our favor because we don't move on. So what do you think about it?
Tell that to the Jews. You understand? They won't let a second pass without mentioning the Holocaust. 24/7. They will have Schindler's List. They will have multi-billion-dollar pictures. They will show it. They will have museums, so forth and so on, because they know that as long as you remember something, then you can prevent it from happening again. But if you don't remember something, then it comes again and you don't even realize that this is what just happened. Imagine if you have amnesia. Someone hits you in the head. Now you don't know where you're coming from, where you went. You understand? This is the situation that we have right now, and this is why IMF and World Bank policies had you remove history from the curriculum. You understand? Because they know that the end result is insane people. And this is Einstein's definition of insanity, is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. This is you when you don't know history, not you specifically, but in general. If you don't know history, then the idea is that you keep doing the same thing. Imagine I bang my head, ow, then it bleeds. But I don't remember that I just banged my head. I say, I wonder what it would be like if I banged my head, bam, and then I bleed, oh, and I don't remember that I just did this. If someone did this, you would have me go to asylum somewhere, right? But this is what the situation is as African people. You don't know anything that happened, so you don't know how to prevent your enemies from doing it again. You understand? So that's one. You mentioned reparations. There are some who want reparations in blood, right? So that's another concept. So if you had over 100 million Africans in the bottom of the world's largest graveyard, this is what they now call the Atlantic Ocean, there are some who say we don't want it in money, that there's been an imbalance, that it needs to be rebalanced in kind.
So we should, to be clear, we should also kill 100 million or something. Or they should come as slaves.
I wouldn't say either of those here on the university campus, but I'm just letting you know that these are other ideas that, just as you said, people are saying that you can't be paid in money. There are those who say that it shouldn't come in money, that whatever should come should be taken. And, so just letting you know that these are ideas that are circulating, not necessarily advocating one way or the other. You are talking about history and moving forward and these things. It's the similar idea, and then also playing the victim. If you know that you have, and I'll give an analogy that Malcolm X used to use. He says, imagine you have someone who has a knife and they stuck the knife in you. Then they pull the knife out 1 inch. That's not real progress. Then they pull it out 2 inches. That's still not progress. Because even what it's doing is it's going to cause this to hemorrhage and so on. Then they pull out 3 inches. That when you start to get to progress is when you actually are starting to heal the wound and help in all these other things. But let's look at another situation. Imagine that I have someone who comes in, imagine our photographer is a mass murderer. He comes in here with a knife, then he starts stabbing me. Now imagine that I'm still typing my paper. You understand? I'm not even recognizing that I have an enemy who's stabbing me in the neck. Much less do I do anything about it. This is what white people love. Is that they've done all these things and they're still doing all these things right now. We're not talking about the past, we're talking about right now. You understand? Look at a documentary called Why Poverty. It talks about Zambia and how places like Switzerland are enriched by all of the copper that they steal wholesale from Zambia. You can look at the same thing here. Look at all over the continent, the exact same thing. But our situation is what I've just described to you. That here someone is coming and they're stabbing me in the neck. And I say, oh, did I spell that word right? Oh. Like it's a mosquito. And blood is shooting out, and I'm saying, right? That once you know you have an enemy, that is where you start to take responsibility and say, what am I going to do about this enemy? But your enemies don't want you to take responsibility. They want you to say, forget about what we did in the past, as though they're not still doing it. Because once you forget it, then they do what they intend to do. Stab you in the neck until all of your blood in the form of oil from Ghana, in the form of gold from Ghana, in the form of cocoa from Ghana, they are bleeding you dry. And you're not even in a position to say, you know what, I'm going to stop the bleeding. Right? That's one step, is to stop all of the things that are enriching America, France, Europe in general, China in general, India in general. Like, we can keep going down the list of all these Eurasians, because Europe and Asia are one thing. That's one step, is to say, I'm going to stop the bleeding. A more intelligent step would be to say, I'm going to do something about this guy who's stabbing me in the neck. Right? So the narrative, this idea of, oh, you don't need to know about your history, don't play the victim, blah, blah, that is something that is an idea that's circulating because it's beneficial for someone. Who benefits from that idea going into your head? The same one who is bleeding you dry right now, as they've been bleeding you dry for the past 400, 500, in the case of the Arabs, 1,000+ years, right? Because they want to keep getting the benefits that they're sucking from you, and they also want to make sure that you're not going to do anything about them. And some people don't want to do anything about them because they say we can't win, so they're stabbing me, but let's just let the trickle keep going. Maybe, maybe I'll still get a chance to finish my paper at the end of the day before I keel over and die.
I forgot to mention this because you were talking to him when doing the you spoke about the similarities between the tree and the Proverbs and then the other language. And then you go to a proverb that said, physician, heal thyself. I remember just Christ said the same thing when he was speaking to his native people. Like, the reason why he couldn't perform many miracles in his own town was because that they didn't believe him. So you mentioned the same. So you said that you people have a proverb that says that reason heal thyself. Yeah, so I want to ask if there's any relation between that. If this guy selling those people there, and then how it links to she and then
Yeah, I actually want to pull up again. You can find the source of all of these things that were stolen and plagiarized. Have you ever heard something like "do unto others as they should do unto you"? You've heard of that before? Where does that come from? That's in the Bible too? They plagiarized that too?
Matthew 5.
Wow, you even know where it is.
There's someone on the mount.
Yeah, there's no one else.
What I'm about to do, there's a text that was translated into several African languages that I mentioned before. It's actually in this one. And I will show you, this is from 4,000 years ago, and you can read it in Akan, Mbambara, English, French, Hausa, Kikongo, Kiswahili, Lingala, Portuguese, Pular, Wolof, and Zulu, right? And again, this is a 4,000-year-old text, and I'll pull up where you can find it.
One of the pieces. The color code, yeah. So for every country, every language. So one other thing. Yeah. One other thing. Some people have said studying.
Bram? Yeah. Go.
Some Africans take offense at African studies. When we begin to refer to Africa as one big family, some people get offended because they think they are individual countries, and anyone who refers to it as African studies or not Ghanaian studies or Tanzanian studies is not respecting the national construct. So the person just wants to think Africa is just one big place that we all live one life. So if there's a war in South Sudan and you say Africa, automatically, because there's something bad in South Sudan, it affects everyone. And indeed, they have a basis for doing that, because the media always presents it that way. That and back to Africa, then they refer to a line that says that there's a war in some small place in Africa, but refers to everyone else. So some people have taken offense that instead of saying Africa, we should say this country, that country, this country. Just like how Europeans don't say Europe, they just say UK, France. We should do the same thing.
I thought they had the European Union. So this is your golden rule as it was written 4,000 years ago, right? And the translation they have here for the English, do unto another so that he might do likewise. The idea is reciprocity. If I do good to you, you do good to me. Different from Sankofa. Sankofa is, so if you know what Sankofa is, this one's more like a diamani agro. So if I do this for you, you do this for me, and that's how we should do. So this it predates any Bible. At this time, there was nothing called the Bible, and this is where they stole it from. If you go to the book of Proverbs, you will find that they got that from the instructions of Amenemope, right? So you can, if you know how to read what your ancestors wrote, you can actually find every single thing that they plagiarized. This is me and Sekhetipeng. Sekhetipeng. Oh, a few. The names. Okay. The ones that I count Chi. I count Yoruba. I count Wolof. I count Kiswahili. I count Kikongo. I count to some degree English. I know a little bit of that one. Un pouco de português. And then I read and write French. I read and write Mother Nature.
Wow.
And some other ones that I don't count.
The ones you count are close to 10.
Oh, it shouldn't reach 10.
Yes, in fact, the ones you don't count.
The ones that I don't count are the ones I can just do small, like I can greet you, I can say thank you, I can say just small things, maybe hold a small conversation. The other ones I've actually studied them formally. I can do poetry in them, I can do all types of things. Yeah, so I'm in a mope, that's the name that I gave you before, but again, none of this is secret. It's on Wikipedia of all places. But you can actually find scholarly sources, that show you the parallels, line for line, and you can see where they stole them from.
So there's also this general opinion among students.
Oh, this is what I wanted to come to. You are talking about the countries and this, that, and the
Yes,
that. So, who decided on those boundaries?
the Berlin Conference.
Wonderful. I'm glad you know the Berlin Conference. So what you are doing is you are now. How many Africans were invited to the Berlin Conference? Zero. Now Belgium was invited, and Belgium is the size of my office. that's hyperbole, of course. Belgium is a teeny tiny place. The Zulu Empire was much bigger. So they weren't saying what's more important or what has more people or what's bigger or anything else. They were saying who's white. Understand? Russia was invited. America was invited. Italy was invited. Of course, Germany is there. They are invited. France, did I say France already? Great Britain, all of these places are invited because guess what? It's like a chessboard. And they said, here is our side of the chessboard. And at that point in time, all these white people were blowing each other out of the water with cannons. They were shooting each other, but they came down and sat together and said, the problems that we have amongst each other will never supersede the problems that we have with all black people. Now with that, they lumped everybody together. They said, whether you call yourself Ewe or Gan or Akan, we don't care. All of you are one thing. And then they decided how they were going to chop you up. So your living room is in Togo, your dining room is in Ghana, right? Your mother is here, your father is there. Then they switch places and now they're in a different country. So this is what they're doing. So what you're really doing is the insanity of honoring the decisions that were made by your enemies without consulting you. You understand? And there's something to be said about, again, what we've been dealing with, our major topic of miseducation, diseducation, and anti-education. And then also what is referred to as re-Africanization and de-whitenization. That once we understand that Africa is land of black people, then we understand that we are not limited to the boundaries of Ghana. That when we start thinking about lands of black people, that includes Haiti, that includes huge swaths of Brazil, that includes many of the Pacific Islands where you have people who are blacker than any person you will ever see on the continent. You understand? So all of that, we talk about ancient Kemet, that's land of the black people. We should also start thinking about modern Kemet, which is all the lands that black people still have, and talk about how we can reclaim the lands that have been stolen, by our enemies. So yeah, that would be my response to that. You're trying to hold on to boundaries that were created without consulting you. You understand? Now, who did that and in whose ultimate interest? Anytime you come to who originated something, usually that will take you to who benefits from something. So how do they benefit from chopping you up into teeny tiny parts? Now imagine, again, we have our photographer who's a mass murderer. He comes in with a knife. Sorry, photographer, I know that you would never do that to us. Now imagine he comes in with the knife, but imagine that I think all the different parts of me are different. So it's only my neck that's being stabbed, so my hands won't come to help. You understand? Without realizing, look, we're all one, we're all black people, and we're all suffering. When one part of us suffers, we need to take that as a collective suffering. But imagine how stupid it would look if here's someone stabbing my neck, and I'm saying, well, my legs are not going to run away because it's not affecting the legs. You're not stabbing my legs. Once you start stabbing my legs, then the leg says, let's go. but the other leg says I'm not being stabbed. So now I'm trying to lurch down the hallway with one leg, and then my hand says, "Oh well, my hand is closer. I'm going to do something." But my other hand says, "I'm not." That's the other side of my body. I'm not going to do anything. So this one is trying to do something that would look like insanity. You would say this is the stupidest person in the world if it was one person who was doing that. But now we're taking that exact same thing and stretching out to the whole black race. You understand? And say, look at these divisions. Something happens in Ghana. Something happens in Sudan. But what if we really saw ourselves as black people, as African people, how we did in ancient Kemet, how we did in Haiti, how we did anytime we were victorious? You know, when we talk about, you've heard of Napoleon. Have you heard of Jean-Jacques Dessalines? Jean-Jacques Dessalines. You haven't? This is what we're talking about. This was the African who defeated Napoleon's army. What was supposed to be the greatest military at that point in time. This is the African in Haiti who defeated Napoleon, who also defeated the Spanish, who also defeated the British, which caused the British to abolish the enslavement of African people. They abolished the trade first because over 10,000 of them had been killed when they tried to take over Haiti. I hope you're following. So now the question becomes, how come you've heard of the loser, Napoleon, but you've never heard of the winner, Dessalines? If I show you a picture of him and how black he is, then you'll understand very clearly why they showed the picture of the loser.
I think it was the European attack. Someone was making fun of it. Because you claim you defeated Napoleon, but you're just like Napoleon.
Yeah, that's a major issue. Now, this is what we're still dealing with to this day. You understand? So, as we are African people, how many of us are wearing things that are made by African people in this room? You understand? So for me, I'm less critical of those people at that point in time and more critical of, well, what can I do different? If I have a critique, my critique doesn't need to be there. It needs to be of myself and say, how can I do something different? The best way to critique is with your actions, not with your mouth. So if I'm wearing African clothes, then that is my critique, right? But he actually did defeat Napoleon, so I'll give him wonderful, good job. But, and I'll show you Dessalines. And he also did many things that, no matter what you're wearing, many of us have not done to this day. So this is Dessalines defeating what was supposed to be the greatest military at that point in time. Then defeated Great Britain, which was also supposed to be one of the greatest militaries at that point in time. You understand? So when they talk about the abolition of enslavement, they say, oh, white people just had a change of heart, Wilberforce, and so forth and so on. It was none of that. This is their own depiction. This is white people's depiction. It was fear of this Haiti is going to be the entire planet. And that's what they're going to end up as. You understand? So what they first realized is that every single ship of enslaved Africans that goes to Haiti or anywhere else is basically reinforcing the enemy army. That's why the trade stopped before the actual enslavement stopped, because they realized, look, we got defeated. France got defeated, Great Britain got defeated, and Spain got defeated by this exact same group of Haitians who realized, look, before we came here, we called ourselves all type of different stuff. We say y'all are Fon, we say y'all are Yoruba, we say y'all are Ewe, we say y'all are this, y'all are that. But look, we're all black people and we have common enemies. Then look at what they were able to accomplish once they came together on the basis of what they had in common. Look at what whites were able to accomplish at the Berlin Conference when they came together on the basis of what they had in common. Now what the whites want to do is prevent you from doing what you did in Haiti, right? To prevent you from doing what you did in Kemet. You understand? Any thought that you have to start thinking about who originated that thought and who benefits ultimately from that thought. Because none of these thoughts that you're thinking or questions that you're asking are your own independent thing. They are the result of stimuli, people saying things being put on TV and movies, on internet, Facebook, all these places, and all those things go into your eyes. That's why these are multi-trillion-dollar industries, to make sure that you always have these things coming into you to influence what you think. Right? You're not going to be Coca-Cola and spend billions of dollars on billboards in Ghana and everywhere else in Africa unless you know that the very fact of you seeing this over and over and over again is going to manipulate your choices. to the point that you're just sitting somewhere and say, oh, I think I want some Coca-Cola. And you don't know why. Now imagine if Coca-Cola, will you have the thought, I want to get some Coca-Cola? You've never even heard of it. How would you want that? So they are putting different things all around you to manipulate your choices. So every single thing that you just happen to want to do is something that enriches who? The ones who benefit from it. If you find out who benefits from you buying that, then you'll find out the one who originated this in the billboards and TV and everything else. On the other side, if you find out who originates something, then you can find out who benefits from something, because usually it's a direct correlation between those two.
And also, one more question. Students on the University of Ghana, some students anyway, they see African studies and UGICs in general as a border. They see it as another way of the university getting to touch on them. And for
it depends on who's teaching, because for some of them I may agree.
for some of the courses, I've not been in every class, so for some of the courses I hear the narrations, and if they are true, I think that's torture. But for African studies in particular, we have to read some texts, and the texts look boring. For instance, if it's in an interactive format, it's like the one you gave us, the book. This looks nice because there are several languages, and I'll read the tree and try to read another language and try to get the colors. It's interactive, it's engaging. Yeah. But the texts are bulky and just bland words, and it looks kind of tiring and too bookish for some students. Yeah. And I think if the department could maybe make small booklets or comics, just
what I do is videos. Some of them. So this is a comparison of text from Proverbs, and you seem to know a lot about that book. And the instructions of Aminamoke. Yeah.
Don't tell lies, just balance your qualities. In Proverbs 11 verse 1. And then we not
So you'll be a good resource, because I don't read the Bible. I know all the information about how it came about, Council of Nicaea, so forth and so on. But I go to the original source text where they stole it from. So here, all of these scholars know this information, and it's here on Wikipedia, which is not a secret site. And you can go and verify it. Never go to Wikipedia as a final source. But just for the simplification, it has all these collections. It shows word for word how they stole it from here, put it in there. Stole it from here, put it in there. And ours came first. Ours are carved in stone. You understand? Just so that you, the descendants, would know, and no one could ever turn you around.
So don't you think with this message you make studying and getting the African message across a little bit difficult? Because if you are going to talk about Africans appreciating our culture and getting back to what Africa really means, that would be easier for people than to add this that the Bible is plagiarized, because people really love the Bible, and they wouldn't have return to what Africa really means, including not liking the Bible for what it is. So you make the message a little bit more difficult.
Yeah,
so would it be easier if you just went along with the message as Dr. King did, getting closer to using the same toilet with them, then you move on from there. So it looks like a simpler approach than trying to fight an all-out battle, because it looks like very difficult.
How did people come to love the Bible? 100 years ago, in this place that we now call Ghana, were people in love with the Bible like they are now? So you have to look at what process they took in order to make it now, that you hate everything that your ancestors gave to you, including clean rivers, you understand? Including pristine forests, including clear lagoons. You hate everything your ancestors gave to you, but now you love all the things that these white Europeans who have stolen, killed, raped, murdered, committed genocide have done to you. What did they do? You understand? That once you know that it wasn't always this way, then that gives you a way of how you can reverse that process. You understand? That's one. I have a colleague who actually makes this same point. He says you can catch more flies with honey than with vinegar. And basically, even though he knows that the Bible is full of lies, he still uses the Bible. For me, I think that's an ethical issue. And everyone has to answer it differently. So for myself, I would never be able to sit here and lie to you and start telling you, well, you're the Hebrews. Those are the Hyksos. These are white people. Your ancestors showed you what they look like, and they didn't look like any of you. So if you go to the tomb of Ramesses III, and I'll show you what that looks like, they show you what the Amu, these are the Hyksos invaders who were driven out in the Exodus. They show you exactly what they look like, but then they also show you what the people of Kemet look like, right? And then they also show you the Nehesi, what the Nubians look like. Now, those of you who are in this room, I should probably have a mirror and ask you, all right, which one is you? Are you the Hebrew or are you the people from Kemet? I want to actually show you, I have a photograph where you can see what these different types of folks look like.
One of the reasons why Christianity got accepted, and it's still being accepted in places where, and because some students go for missions, they go outside to go and spread the Christian message, and they go to places where they've not really come across the gospel, and when they tell them the message, it's liberating to them. Those people, it's fellow blacks doing the evangelism. They are not white people, but they still accepted the message. Say why? Because if they were just white people, then we could see they were manipulating us. But it was another black man.
That's what manipulation is. To get you to do things for their benefit, ultimately. You understand? That's the whole point. You understand? So this is from the tomb of Ramesses III, and this is information, you can find it in some of the works of Sheikh Anta Diop. So can someone read this for me? Make it. Can you read this for me, please?
It's like someone is sitting.
No, read it. Don't tell me what it shows.
No one can.
Oh, I think this is part of what we're getting at. So look here. So look here. The very bottom here, and then the top of the next page. And show me what you see.
That's man.
Man, what other translations they have is underline. Exactly. So this is what they called themselves, Ramech, right? And this is how they depicted themselves. Now, if you don't know how to read, or if you don't have a dictionary, you just say, look at the picture, it says someone sitting, right? But what your ancestors put on those walls is so that you can see this is who we are, and they look like you. Now we'll come to your Hebrew folks. These are the Amu. Here we go. So these are the Asiatics, they call them, those who came in as invaders and then were driven out by an African who you can see his body on display in the museum to this day. Real people, not imaginary people in the Bible.
So the one who drove out these Asiatics, he predates Abraham.
So this is Yamos. Shall I show you his picture? Yamos. You want to see a picture of him? Real people.
But it's still all the people in the Bible, why do God is like? Well, I can't think of it. There's nothing like them.
Oh, you haven't found the bodies of imaginary people?
Yeah, I'm not thinking about it. But
Of course.
There's no evidence of them.
Of course not.
About it.
Yeah, have you found the body of Jesus? Please show it to me when you find it.
Jesus went to heaven.
That's convenient. As did everyone else. So therefore, we don't need to show you any
This have the body of Peter. Okay, the Catholic Church said that.
somewhere.
And Peter is
But I'll show you the African who drove out the Hyksos in what you all know as the Exodus. But you would be surprised to know that the Hyksos came as invaders and were defeated by the jet black Africans who were able to restore
So
black
these
people.
are the Berbers.
So these are also invaders to Africa.
The Berbers.
Yeah. So you have two different types. You have some who are black, who are indigenous people to that place. You have others who also have that title, but these are recent migrations back into Africa. So you have a reverse migration. The main one was around 3,000 years ago. There have been various genetic studies that have been done in the last few years that point to around 3,000 years ago. This is the time of Jehuti Mes, where he did a reversal of the policy of Kemet. Always it was keep these Eurasians out, but he started to allow them to come in. So he started marrying the women in, allowing the princes to come in, so forth and so on. Around that exact same time is where you have a reverse migration of these Eurasians into Africa. So I'll show you a real person. Now you'll probably wonder why they talk about Yah and Yahweh and all this Yah. That is actually coming from the lunar deity. When I say lunar, that's moon deity. That was a major lunar deity at the time that the Hyksos were driven out. So they retained the name of that major lunar deity, which was also part of the name of the ruler who drove them out. Here we go. Meet your ancestor, Yamos. And the Mos, if you ever hear Mos or Moses or anything as in Ramesses or so forth and so on, it means born of. So when his name is Yamos, it means born of that lunar deity called Yah. Right? So when they're talking about Yah, they're talking about a deity from ancient Kemet who temples were set up to. When they're talking about Amen, they're talking about a deity from Kemet. Now when you look at him, he's blacker than most of you in this room. And this is the one who was able to defeat the Hyksos invaders and drive them out. The Hyksos are one of the many who are referred to as Amu. That was that second one that I showed you. And that's what I pointed out to you in the dictionary. So his body is still there if you want to see it. Here's your ancestor who defeated the Hyksos. So when you're seeing the most is born of, right? Born of. When you're seeing the Yah, anytime you just hear Moses, you need to ask what's the deity at the beginning, because you've cut off the name. It will be like a Yoruba name. If you just hear Dele, you know it's not the full name. It has to be maybe Ogundele or Shangodele or Oshundele, or some deity's name comes in the front. The same thing for here. If you just hear Moses, you know there has to be a Kemetic deity's name at the front. So Yah, Moses, is the lunar deity born of. Ra, Moses, Ra is the word for the sun, also the deity of the sun. So it's saying born of the sun. Jehuti, Moses, you're saying born of the deity named Jehuti, what the Greeks call Thoth, and so forth and so on. So if you actually want to know where all of these stories, Exodus comes from, it comes from invaders who started off at a place called Hutweret, right? So they were allowed to approach into the delta, then they used that as a launching pad for an operation to take over much of northern Kemet, and then they were eventually driven out by the jet black Africans who you've seen to the south, who were able to drive them back into southwestern Eurasia.
So what about the Red Sea, the downwind?
Show me any evidence of it. You know why you won't? If you want to know the story of the parting of the Red Sea, that's a Kemetic story. It's called the story of the Golden Lotus. And in the story, it takes place in the 4th dynasty. And actually, I'll pull it up for you and I can read it for you. And in the story, the ruler was very despondent. He says, I don't have anything to do. And he calls one of his trusted advisors. And the advisor says, you know, you should have these women. Well, let me read it for you as I'm pulling it up. Ancient Egypt, or Kemet as we prefer. And this is a story of Khufu, and that's the one who built the Great Pyramid of Giza. What is called the Mer, that's the word for pyramid. So Seneferu, father of the pharaoh Khufu, who built the Great Pyramid of Giza, reigned long over contented and peaceful Egypt, or Kemet as the indigenous name is. That's one thing about the whites, they hate to use the term Kemet. That's the indigenous name, but they hate to use the term Kemet, because as soon as you hear Kemet, it means land of blacks. Now what the white scholars will say, no, they just mean the soil is black.
Yeah.
They'll say the soil is black. But then what they don't remember is that the people said they were made of the soil by a divinity called Khnum on his potter's wheel. So they're still getting back to their black. You understand? So even if they're saying the soil is black, it's saying that's what we're made out of. We're made of what makes us black. So Seneferu, the father of Khufu, who built the Great Pyramid of Giza, reigned long over a contented and peaceful Kemet. He had no foreign wars and few troubles at home, and with so little business of state, he often found time hanging heavy on his hands. This is again a translation of the story of the Golden Lotus. One day he wandered wearily through his palace at Men-Nefer, that means the beautiful establishment, seeking for pleasures and finding none. That's where they get the word Memphis. If you hear Memphis, Tennessee, it's coming from Memphis. The original is Men-Nefer. Seeking for pleasures and finding none that would lighten his heart. Then he bethought him of his chief magician, Zazamanch, and he said, if any man is able to entertain me and show me new marvels, surely it is the wise scribe of the rolls. Bring Zazamanch before me. Straightway his servants went to the house of wisdom and brought Zazamanch to the presence of the Nesu, that's the indigenous word for what they call Pharaoh. Pharaoh comes from the word Per-A'a, which is great house. So when they say, oh, the White House has issued orders, or what is this, Downing Street has said something, that's what they did. They took the name of the place and then gave it to the ruler, but that wasn't the indigenous name of the ruler, but that's a sidebar. And Seneferu said to him, I have sought throughout all of my palace for some delight and found none. Now of your wisdom devise something that will fill my heart with pleasure. Then said Zazamanch to him, O Nesu, or Pharaoh, life, health, and strength be to you. That's how they would always pray for the ruler. My counsel is that you should go sailing upon the Nile and upon the lake below Memphis, Men-Nefer. This will be no common voyage, if you will follow my advice in all things, believing that you will show me marvels. Pull it back up. The suspense. Believing that you will show me marvels, I will order out the royal boats, said Seneferu. And I actually got a chance to go into the pyramid built by Seneferu. Yet I am weary of sailing upon the Nile and upon the lake. This will be no common voyage, Zazamanch assured him. For your rowers will be different from any you have seen at the oars before. They must be fair maidens from the royal house of the king's women. Oh, you like that idea? And as you watch them rowing and see the birds upon the lake, the sweet fields and the green grass upon the banks, your heart will grow glad. Indeed, this is something new, agreed the Nesu, or Pharaoh, showing some interest at last. Therefore, I give you charge of this expedition. Speak with my power and command all that is necessary. And the ladies, of course, looked as beautiful as these ladies right in front of me now, right? And you will be playing Seneferu, and then our chief photographer will be the chief magician, Zazamanch.
The story we read in, I think Michael Jackson's one of his music.
Remember the time?
Yeah,
right?
I think the same story, like, they wanted to entertain, the king wanted someone to entertain him.
Yeah.
They brought someone from their house.
Yeah.
And Michael Jackson came.
It starts like this, but it's from an actual story, right? Imagine if we actually knew that. Then we would say it's more than a music video, we're actually learning something. Of course, it didn't go like in the video, it goes like this.
Yeah, when I watched it, I said, Michael is creative, not knowing it's from somewhere.
Your ancestors were creative, right?
Wow.
So, indeed, this will be something new, agreed the Nesu, showing some interest at last. Therefore, I give you charge of this expedition. Speak with my power and command all that is necessary. Then says Zazamanch to the officers and attendants of the Nesu, or Pharaoh Seneferu, bring me 20 oars of ebony inlaid with gold, and blades of light wood inlaid with electrum, and choose, so that's gold mixed with usually silver, and choose for rowers the 20 fairest maidens in the Nesut's household, that's you all. 20 virgins, slim and lovely, that's you all, perhaps, fair in their limbs, beautiful and with flowing locks like mine. And bring me 20 nets of golden thread, and give these nets to the fair maidens to be garments for them, and let them wear ornaments of gold and electrum and malachite. All was done according to the words of Zazamak. And presently the Nesut was seated in the royal boat, while the maidens rowed him up and down the stream upon the shining waters of the lake. So that was nice. You can picture yourself just enjoying that. Right? So all was done, and the heart of Seneferu was glad at the sight of the beautiful rowers at their unaccustomed task, and he seemed to be on a voyage in the golden days that were to be when Osar, or what they call Osiris in Greek, returns to rule the earth. So the idea of death and resurrection and coming back to rule, that's coming from ancient Kemet as well. But presently a mischance befell that gay and happy party upon the lake. In the raised stern of the royal boat, 2 of the maidens were steering with great oars fastened to the post. Suddenly the handle of one of the oars brushed against the head of the girl who was using it, and swept the golden lotus she wore on the fillet that held back her hair into the water, where it sank out of sight. So this is you. You have your golden lotus, and it fell into the water. With a little cry, she leaned over and gazed after it. So lean over and gaze after it. Oh, oh. Right. And as she ceased from her song, so did all the rowers on that side who were taking their time from her. Why have you ceased to row? Asked the Nesut, that's Seneferu, which is beautiful brother, literally is what his name means. Why have you ceased to row? Asked Seneferu. And they replied, our little steerer has stopped and leads us no longer. And why have you ceased to steer and lead the rowers with your song? Asked Seneferu. Forgive me, Nesut. Life, health, strength be to you. So anytime you mention the name of the ruler, you say life, health, and strength, which is a very African thing to do. She sobbed, but the oar struck my hair and brushed from it the beautiful golden lotus set with malachite which your majesty gave to me, and has fallen into the water and is lost forever. Row on as before, I will give you another, said Seneferu. But the girl continued to weep, saying, I want my golden lotus back and no other. Then said Nesut, there is only one who can find the golden lotus that has sank to the bottom of the lake. Bring me Zazamak, my royal photographer, my royal magician, he who thought of this voyage. Bring him here, onto the royal boat before me. So Zazamak was brought to where Seneferu sat in his silken pavilion on the royal boat. And as he knelt, Pharaoh said to him, Zazamak, my friend, my brother, I have done as you advised. My royal heart is refreshed and my eyes delighted at the sight of these lovely rowers. And they sang to me. While on the shore I see the trees and the flowers and the birds. I seem to be sailing on the golden days, either of those of old when Re ruled the earth, or those to come when the good divinity Osiris shall return from the Duat. Right? This is where you said Jesus came to and then will come back. That's the idea that they stole from ancient Kemet. But now a golden lotus has fallen from the hair of one of those maidens to the bottom of the lake, and she has ceased to sing, and the rowers on her side cannot keep time with their oars. And she is not to be comforted with promises of other gifts, but weeps for her golden lotus. Zazamak, I wish to give back the golden lotus to the little one here, and see the joy return to her eyes. Neni Aji. Nesut, my lord, life, health, and strength be to you. Right? Answered Zazamak, the magician. I will do what you ask, for to one with my knowledge it is not a great thing. Yet maybe it is an enchantment you have never seen, and it will fill you with wonder, even as I promised, and make your heart rejoice yet further in new things. Then Zazamak stood at the stern of the royal boat and began to chant great spells and words of power, just as we do still to this very day. And presently he held out his wand over the water, and the lake parted as if a piece had been cut out of it with a great sword. What came first? This is the part you were looking for. The lake here was 20 feet deep, and the piece of water that the magician moved rose up and set itself upon the surface of the lake, so that there was a cliff of the water on that side 40 feet high. Now the royal boat slid gently down into the great cleft of the lake until it rested on the bottom. On the side towards the 40-foot cliff of water, there was a great open space where the bottom of the lake lay uncovered, as firm and dry as the land itself. And there, just below the stern of the royal boat, lay the Golden Lotus. With a cry of joy, cry for joy please. Wonderful, right on cue. With a cry of joy, the maiden who had lost it sprang over the side onto the firm ground, picked it up and set it once more in her hair. Then she climbed swiftly back into the royal boat and took the steering oar into her hands once more. Zalzama slowly lowered his rod, and the royal boat slid up the side of the water until it was level with the surface once more. Then at another word of power, as if drawn by the magician's rod, the great piece of water slid back into place, and the evening breeze rippled the still surface of the lake as if nothing out of the ordinary had happened. But the heart of the Pharaoh Seneferu rejoiced and was filled with wonder. And he cried, Zalzama, my brother, you are the greatest and wisest of magicians. You have shown me wonders and delights this day, and your reward will be all that you desire, and a place next to my own in Kemet, land of the black people. Then the royal boat sailed gently over the lake in the glow of the evening, while the 20 lovely maidens in their gardens of golden net and the jeweled lotus flowers in their hair dipped their ebony and silver oars in the shimmering waters and sang sweetly a love song of old Kemet. She stands upon the further side, between flows of the Nile, and in those waters deep and wide there lurks a crocodile. Yet is my love so true and sweet, a word of power, a charm. The stream is land beneath my feet and bears me without harm. For I shall come to where she stands, no more be held apart, and I shall take my darling's hand and draw her to my heart. And that's the story. So if you want to know where they plagiarized the story of parting the waters, they got it from the place that they had overrun for some time before Yamos, who you saw, finally was able to drive them out. But when he drove them out, they kept their stories of Yah, what they call Yahweh, which was a major lunar divinity. They kept the story of Yah-Moses, which they just shortened to Moses. They kept all these stories of parting of waters, of the Great Flood. You can find every single one of those stories in ancient Kemet carved into stone. You can find others in papyri that are in the Louvre, and you can read them if you know how to read them. You understand? And this is what all these white people are getting PhDs in. They call it Egyptology. So everyone is learning about your stuff. I showed you about the sun rising. Everyone who is going there on December 25th, they are Arabs and whites. You won't find a single Ghanaian or any African who is the descendant of those who built that temple to Amen, who still have Onyame, that's born on Miminenda, the response of which is Ya Amen. It's all the exact same stuff, but none of us know it. On December 25th, what are we doing? We're praying to an imaginary white man and sitting under a tree hoping that another imaginary white man will bring you gifts. You understand? So this is what we are suffering from right now. This is miseducation, diseducation, and anti-education. Your ancestors left all of this for you. And there's a proverb. It says, kasa, that is, if your ancestors, if your elders leave you with an elder dignified talk, you don't leave it and go speak childish talk. But this is exactly what we've done. All of our stuff is written down, but now we don't even want to know it. If I say Pharaoh, you say bad guy. You understand? That's according. This is going back to the very first point. Your own heroes, right, and their enemies, right? So your own heroes, the ones who were able to liberate you from these Eurasians who had run into Kemet, you understand? They're saying that's a bad guy, because that's from their perspective. That's what they should say. But those are our heroes. Meanwhile, their heroes are our enemies. You understand? So all of this comes back to our whole point. You have to understand your own history. you have to know who your own heroes are, because if your enemies select your heroes for you, there will be those who will lead you to destruction and ruin, and not the ones who will liberate you.
So any final thought for the regional world? Or there's someone, okay.
Zasamach.
So, I know, okay, it's a perception that the whites are like 40 years ahead of us. Development and everything. The way they think.
They're actually about 3,000 years behind us.
Okay.
Because we were doing all of these things for 3,000 years before you first started to get Greece and Rome coming up onto the stage of world history. So even if you go older than that, you can find the world's first astronomical megaliths, right? And this is at a place called Nabta Playa. And what it does is each one of these huge multi-ton boulders, it points to a specific constellation that will only be in this configuration at a specific point in time. So this is the very first idea of a calendar. You understand? So we're going back thousands and thousands of years, even before Kemet. You understand? Now at that point in time, what were whites doing? Yeah. Fiber optics, which you are the one who is inventing. This was the point that I wanted to make, and I'll come to your question. But you said you're in what, biomedical engineering or something? Now imagine you spend your whole life and you've invented a procedure that is the most amazing thing, a bionic arm that, you know, allows you to do whatever, a bionic leg that lets you kick a football goal from 2 miles away. Imagine you did your whole life to do this great invention, and now nobody in Ghana has ever heard your name. That's Dr. Thomas Mensah. You understand? So he did this great thing. You are on your WhatsApp, you're using internet every day, talking about, oh, I'm streaming all this huge stuff, and you don't know that it's a Ghanaian who did it.
So the media. The media.
So you have internet. What are you using it for? Right? So once you start to know that you have been intentionally diseducated, miseducated, and anti-educated, that's where you take responsibility for yourself and stop blaming everyone else. That's what we like to say, right? Why are we playing the victim? Well, don't play the victim. You can take responsibility for your own education, for your own re-Africanization, which is re-Blackanization, and your own de-Whitenization, which is your de-Eurasianization, right? That's on you to do. Well, please.
Okay, so it's like, okay, you live with your mother, you are 5 years old, your mother is 45 years old. The purpose of African studies is that we come to know our culture and develop on our own as Africans. So if you being the child want to be independent of your mom, we being Africans, let me say we being Africans want to be independent of the whites. By looking at, they are providing us with most of our stuff, we can understand. So if I'm 5 years and I say, oh, okay, I want to be independent of my mom, I think I have a long way to go. I'm gonna struggle. So if we are trying to maybe help Africanization, learn more about Africans and all that, I think it will be hard for us, but it's possible. It's possible. If it's possible, do you think it will work for us if we are trying to be independent? Within a short while.
Okay, I understand your question. I got the chance to go to Ethiopia 2 years ago. And when I went to Ethiopia, I saw the fossil of who the real mother is. You mentioned, what if you want to be like your mother? So this is a fossil of Dinknesh. And in Amharic, it translates to "you are wonderful." This is over 3.5 million years old, right? This skeleton. Now, when we talk as Africans, we don't have to make up Jesus or Moses or whoever. We can point to the fossils because they're real life people, right? So we are the actual parents, but what we are doing is we're following behind a very mean, cruel, and recalcitrant child. So we were the first people on the face of the planet Earth. However, now we're taking marching orders from those who, exactly. Now imagine if you do that. Look at what these children are doing. Look at climate change. Look at what they're doing to the environment everywhere that they go. They're actually destroying the planet Earth. Just about 2 weeks ago, there was a story about Antarctica a part of Antarctica about the size of a United States state called Rhode Island. This huge thing is going to break off as an iceberg and is going to dissolve into the ocean, the size of a whole state. So picture like Greater Accra region plus all goes into the ocean and dissolves, like that size. That what that's going to do is raise the oceans all throughout the world. You understand? And that's only one. All of Antarctica eventually is going to go at the rate it's going. Now this is what your recalcitrant children have done. Destroyed the entire planet. You understand? Now you were here from the time of Denknesh, 3 million years, and up until 50 years ago everything was pure. Your waters were pristine. Your forests were untouched. You had your sacred groves in Samampo. You say, no, now I'm civilized, and now look at your lagoon. What you could have drank from before, go and drink from that now. You understand? This is when you are now falling behind a child, right? When you were in control as an elder, now you are the one who is giving the orders. But now once you're following behind a child, the whole planet is being destroyed right in front of your eyes. So there's a proverb that says it's a silly daughter who tries to teach her mother how to bear children. It's a silly daughter who tries to teach her mother how to bear children. Wanana kasam chirawa use mibi sameja. So your grandparent tells you something, you say, I'm gonna ask my father. Was your father around when this was going on? No. But this is our situation. So instead of going to the source of these texts, what our ancestors had left behind, now we're listening to the words of children, and we're reaping all of the results from doing so. And all of these results are the things that we say that we don't like, right? So this is what we have to think of. Just the point that we think that we are the children and we've been on the planet before anyone else. If we want to talk about inventions, we invented every other person on the planet. You understand? They should be paying rent to African people just to be on our planet. I hope you're following along. But this is how upside down we are. As we mentioned, the very first map in the history of the world was a south up map. Now we look at it with an upside down camera. This is a perfect illustration of how upside down we are, that we see ourselves as the children and we see them as the parents. Now, how do you know what direction to go in if you don't know which way is north and which way is south? Right? And I give the analogy of, imagine you fall into water, right? You're in the ocean, you fall into the water at night, and you really aren't sure of which way is up and which way is down. You understand? Imagine if you choose wrongly. Now you're swimming with all of your might. You're swimming. Then you come to realize, oops, I swam in the wrong direction. You understand? Now all of your energy is gone and your last breath is gone. And guess what? You weren't going in the right way. So you're trying to imitate someone who is a destroyer. You're trying to imitate someone who is a murderer, genocide. If you look at the UN Convention of Genocide, everything that they are doing to African people is in that definition. So we definitely qualify according to their own definition, right? But now imagine if we know which way is up. Then we start swimming towards air. Then we start swimming towards what will give us life. But that's our situation now, that we're trying to be like what we should not be. I hope it's clear. And then even when we talk about development and all of these different things, I had a colleague here at African Studies who was talking about, hunting. And I thought it was a good analogy where he talks about when you have a hunter who's pursuing game, what the dog will do is it won't follow along with the hunter and pursue the game that's out front. What it will do is it'll cut off to the side. And you'll see this with leopards, with lions, with every hunter. They'll cut off to the side and then they'll pursue from an angle. And then when they pursue from an angle, that's when they're able to overtake. But if I'm running behind, you're running forward, then I just get tired, you just go off. But when I'm able to get an angle, then I'm able to see the point at which my trajectory and your trajectory links up. And then that's when I'm able to, do something. So what we're doing is we're trying to follow behind children. You're going here and I'm running behind you. What? That's not how it works. Any animal in, a lion could tell you what you're doing is dumb. What we need to start doing is when we talk about ancient Kemet, they talk about Atum, So when Europeans in physics, they talk about the basic building block of everything is the atom, they're also getting that from Kemet, because the divinity's name was Atum, the creator deity of everything else. And the first 4 children of Atum were Shu, Tefnut, Geb, and Nut. Now Shu is the word for wind, Tefnut is the word for moisture, Geb, that's earth, and then Nut is the sun, the fire, and the sky. There you go. Now, if you look at, but again, we know which one came first, right? So if you look at this type of concept, embedded in that is a blueprint for development, right? So Nut, that's the fire in the sky. Imagine if all of your energy needs, you get it from solar, right? Imagine other energy needs you get from the wind power, other you get from earth, other you get from water, you understand? So there's technology now, and I have a colleague who's working on this in the Caribbean, where they have these turbines, under ocean turbines. So as the natural flow of the current turns these turbines, it generates electricity, and one of the byproducts is pure water, that's usable, potable water, right? So that is an African-centered view of how to develop things, not like fossil fuels that destroy the planet. You can tell that's something that Europeans came up with, and you're following behind the children. But as elders who brought that first creation story into being, you can start thinking from a different paradigm once you know that the other paradigm exists. You understand? And in Foundations of African Thought, I asked my students how many people know of all of the different creations or any of the creation stories from Africa. So in Kemet alone, we have the story of Atum at the beginning. We have the story of Ptah at the beginning. And each one of them has their own nuances and understandings. Now, I've given you a development framework based on a creation story, because your ancestors laid out these are the various elements that you need to master in order to be able to do something serious. Imagine wind power, right? That's something that is sustainable. That's in alignment with who we are as African people. You know, solar, so forth and so on. There are others who have a colleague who I met who's at Georgia Tech, and he's working on these high temperature batteries where it's, you know, melting, it's molten aluminum, and they're using this in order to store energy as heat instead of as current and charge and these other things. So that's like looking at lava. You can reproduce that type of thing inside of a volcano and get all of your energy needs from that, right? But when we talk about Atum is just one of the manifestations of the sun. So the idea is that all of these different things are just transformations and manifestations of the sun. And even when you look at fossil fuels, all that is the locked up sun's energy, because you had the sun that shone on the forest got submerged, eventually it got put under multiple layers, it got crushed into oil, but all of that is just the sun's energy that's locked up through photosynthesis. You understand? But imagine if you just go back to the source, the sun. That's what your ancestors said. That psalm that we were reading, 104, is just talking, the whole hymn is talking about the sun. That you're the one who causes this to happen, you're the one who allows this to grow, you're the one who allows this to happen. Your ancestors laid out the blueprint, but that's the reason why we don't know about any of this information. Because if we did know, imagine the things that we would be doing for ourselves. It's intentional. It's intentional. Someone benefits from you not knowing.
It's really final thoughts, really final remarks. I'm going to you because you put that 2 hours or 3 hours.
Yeah.
3 hours, yes. It's very generous of you because no me at this time.
Well, this is why I repatriated to Africa, because what I realized is that there's a lot of information that we don't get a chance to learn here. You understand? Certain things that, you know, people in other places take for granted here is not there. It's not in the system, I would say. But I think it's a mutually beneficial type of situation, because if I go to the US, you have this whole conscious community. These people can tell you everything about Imhotep. They can tell you about Ptahhotep. That's the world's oldest book in the history of the entire world, written here in Africa. Has anyone here read a book before? You read a book? Have you read any book before in your life? Do you think it's important to know the very first book that was ever written? So how come we haven't heard of it? Look it up. Instructions of Patahotep. And that's even only the oldest surviving one, because African people wrote others before that. Kagimni, Harjadef, both of those came before Patahotep. And that's the oldest surviving one. The world's oldest spiritual text, the pyramid text. And I have those here as well in translation, and you can read those. That's where you get all your biblical stuff from. The core ideas of Holy Trinity, death and resurrection, all of those come even before this one. This is a Peret Imheru. That's the very first one.
So how do you do the comparison? So Ilya said he wrote from the Bible. So
Mhm.
how are you able to do the comparison?
So for me, that's not my area. There are other scholars who work on that.
Oh, okay.
Right. So for me, I just go to the source. I'm not around.
But I think if you're reading the Bible so that you can do the comparison yourself.
Not me. There are plenty of scholars who do that work. So if you're interested, you will find so many scholars who do that work. That is not my work. My work is the connections between ancient Africa and contemporary Africa, Africans on the continent and the rest of the African world. That's what I do. So if you want to read Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization, he goes through and lays it out and stresses out Amen and Mope. You can, all of that is done. All you have to do is a search for it is done. Right? But what I was saying is that it's a mutually beneficial relationship, at least potentially, because all these people who can lay down all this information, when they're hungry, guess where they go? To the grocery store owned by white people. When they want to wear clothes, guess where they go? To the Walmart or wherever. If they're hungry, whatever they do, if they have a child, they're going to the hospital. So you have all this information, but it's not practicalized, you know, as much as it needs to be. Now I'm generalizing. There are some people who try to do their own gardens, who try to be consistent. My own parents were like that. They moved out of Brooklyn, had a multi-million-dollar house, and they moved out of Brooklyn to North Carolina to build their own log cabin. So with chainsaws, they were cutting logs, laying them on top of each other so that they can be independent and grow their own food and have their own well water and things of that nature, because they thought being free is more important than being locked into someone else's system and working for them. So that's that. But generally speaking, most people, no matter what they know, no matter how conscious they are, they're very dependent on whites. Here is the inverse, even though it's starting to get to that place. But here, if I give someone some corn, they can turn it into banku. You understand? Right now, I'm building a house, and it's going to be made out of mud brick. And I have someone who's at Mampong who is building it for me, because he's kept this information of how to build your own things from what you have on your soil from ancient times, which is what we've been doing for 3+ million years up to now. In an unbroken stream, he's still doing this. So this is, yeah, but it's a different type of atapami. It's an 8-sided house. Yeah, story building. And it's 8-sided because I mentioned the 4 original deities of Atum, right? So Atum, when they say the atom is a building block in physics, that the original deity in ancient Kemet in the creation story is Atum. Then Atum gave birth to Shu, Tefnut, male and female. It's always complementary pairs. It's not Adam came first and then a rib or something crazy that white people came up with. It's the idea that it requires both male and female to create life. So Atum gave birth to Shu and Tefnut. And then you have Nut and Geb. Then you had Asar and Aset. That's the ones we've been talking about before as that Holy Trinity who gave birth to Heru, but Heru came later. Then you had Set and Nebuthet. Now, what you have are these 4 original divinities. If you go to the Dogon people in their creation story, they talk about the 8 original Nomo. All throughout Africa, they talk about these 8 original. So that's what each one of the sides of this house represents, right? So it's a very old concept, but it's a very new way of representing it. So again, we're going beyond. I have to go forward to the UK or back to my village. Why can't we do our own things? Once we understand the worldview, why can't we innovate and do things that are necessary to move Africa forward? So that's the whole idea behind this. But what I was saying, the whole point is that here you have people who still know how to do these types of things. I can build my house from scratch, no problem. I can grow my own food, no problem. You know, I can, draw my own water and purify it. If I get sick, I don't need to go to the hospital. I can go and pluck a leaf. You understand? So this is a level of independence that is still here. But psychologically, everyone is going to church to worship an imaginary white man. So imagine if you can bring those two together, the physical independence that we have here of I still know how to do things for myself and I don't have to depend on white folks for everything. And then the mental independence here of I know who I am and so forth and so on. If those two come together, that's a very powerful combination, which is the reason why in the diaspora they teach us that African people are bad. All you'll ever hear about continental Africans is that they're all warlords and they have AIDS and they have Ebola and blah, blah, blah. So at the end of the day, you in America, you say, I don't want to go to Africa. I don't want to have anything to do.
Black Americans.
This is the point. 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 So you have any idea that goes into your head, you have to think who benefits and who originates that idea. So just what I laid out, imagine if we can bring this one together with this one, that's a very powerful thing. Then you don't have to depend on World Bank or IMF or HIPIC or anything else. We as black people are able to run our own destiny, as Kwame Nkrumah said, that we're able to manage our own affairs. But when you have continental Africans don't want to deal with diasporans don't want to deal with continentals, then the end result is achieved. That's the reason why they put that on the TV for you 24/7 and the music video. And I remember growing up, they showed us pictures of Ethiopia, these children with flies on their eyes and these skinny, that's Africa. No, I'm not African. If someone calls you African, you have to fight them because that's like the worst insult. You understand? But you don't understand what's going on until you get older and say, wow, why did they only tell me this about Africa? How come they didn't tell me that we invented mathematics? You understand? How come they didn't tell us that we invented writing, the world's oldest book, the world's oldest medical text? If I knew that, then I would of course want to be associated. And what if they told you about the stoplight was invented by Garrett A. Morgan? You understand? What if they told you about Robert Mensah? What if they told you about the inventors? Matter of fact, when we leave, I'll take you up to the inventors poster so you can see all these things. Jan Maxliger, the shoe lasting machine, Elijah McCoy, the oil cup. Like I can go down. This is what we learned just from childhood growing up, that we invented basically everything there because they took us there to work and that's what we did. We invented all this stuff. And it's even amazing that we got any of the patents because at that point in time, if you go and apply for a patent, the white people can lynch you and kill you. Right? If someone is enslaving you and you invent something, the enslaver is the one who gets the rights for it. And all of these things are things to make work easier. You understand? Because we're the ones who are doing the work, so we're the ones who are doing the inventing. But even in that oppressive system, we still got all of these different patents. So if you look at Louis Latimer, have you heard of Louis Latimer? He was a draftsman for all of these so-called white inventors. So from Thomas Edison to what's the other one? Alexander Graham Bell. The exact same guy was the one who did all of this stuff together, but he never got the credit for the patents. So when you see all of their so-called great inventors, who did they have in common? The one that he was able to patent was the light filament, right? So as they were trying to do the light, it would never stay on, but he was able to discover a filament that was able to make light something that was actually something sustainable that could be used. But we don't hear about Louis Latimer. You understand? So this is basically the idea that there's so much more that we need to learn, so much more to know. And once Africans or the diaspora and continent can come together, then we can be free as African people. Thanks for your time. Thanks for listening.
Thank you very much.
No problem. No
I
problem.
would like to take a good picture. So where can we take that? Go upstairs. So we'll take it upstairs.